I know some of the Metro folks are also coming back here. And thanks for everyone online, but yes, good morning and welcome to the biannual meeting of the Oregon Modeling Statewide Collaborative, the OMSC. I'm Chris Melson. I'm a manager of the Transportation Planning Analysis Unit at the Oregon DOT. Before getting into all the great content that we do have for this meeting, did want to just first thank LCOG and Callie in particular for hosting this, and folks online really missing out on some of the delicious refreshments that Callie also brought in. So thank you. And also before kind of getting started on some of the agenda items, just a note, this biannual meeting is a little bit different format than in the past. From my understanding, in the past, we've had the modeling program coordination subcommittee the same day as this biannual meeting. That was in the morning and the biannual meeting was in the afternoon. Actually, we're just talking about how important trends were post-COVID. I think kind of the trends here where there was a pretty big overlap on who was attending both of those meetings. And there was some updates that were some, repetition from both of those meetings. So we decided, the executive committee decided to merge those together for this format and shorten it as well. And so, yes, I'm saying that just as an FYI, but also if anyone did have any thoughts after this meeting, any feedback on how this new format is, let myself know, let Carol know, let others know. So with that, yes, a good mic check for folks online. Can you hear us in the room? I think there's a thumbs up, right, Carol?
All right, so remains. Excellent.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. How about you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
That's very good, Sam. Awesome. And yes, so I think we have time for brief introductions. I might just ask you, Carol, just how many folks are online? Is there a manageable amount for
26 people online.
Wow.
So maybe we do a quick round here in the room and we ask the folks online to just look at the participant list.
Yeah, maybe that's probably reasonable too. Yeah, we'll go around the room just very briefly, and then online, just putting your name, your role, and your agency in the chat probably is appropriate for that amount of people. And I'll just start. Again, I'm Chris Nelson, manager of Transportation Planning Analysis Unit at ODOT. I'm also the current chair of OMSC. And yeah, probably just your name, role, and agency makes sense for in the room too. So I'll probably go to my right.
Becky Knudsen, ODOT, TPOW.
Jingren, another ODOT modeler for Region 3 and the 5 primary.
Nick Siegel, LCOG, GS analyst and land use model.
Kelly Clark with LCOG, a transportation planner.
Carol Richardson, plan engineering.
Joe Broach, Portland Metro and current chair of the travel survey subcommittee.
Peter Bosa, Portland Metro, and the modeling section.
Alex Bernardi, ODOT modeling section, TPOW.
Nick Meltzer, I manage Albany area MPO and Corvallis area MPO, and I co-chair emerging tech subcommittee with Alex. And then just a note on this format, I used to usually always choose either morning or afternoon. And I was really excited to see it combined and it to be in person because then I can to attend. So thanks. And thanks for hosting us, Kelly. I don't think I've been here since before COVID.
I know. Yeah, happy to.
I'm Matt Bin, manager of Metro's modeling and forecasting group.
Awesome. I guess we've got 5 minutes we can try to do the online folks just so everybody here in the room knows who's on. Shall we?
Yeah, let's do it. I might ask you, Carol, to help with that.
After Coram introduces us.
Hi folks, Coram Ketchum. I staff Campo.
I'll just do a quick roll call and introduce yourself and who you're with. So Amanda Deering. Amanda's with PBOT. She's on. Kim Sapinar.
Hi, Kim Sapinar, the SCATS MPO in Salem.
Mark Harrington,
Mark Harrington with RTC up here in Southwest Washington.
Zachary,
Good morning, everybody. Zachary Horowitz with ODOT TPAL.
Ben Cheney,
Good morning, Ben Cheney with ODOT TPAL.
Billy Greger.
Good morning, Billy McGregor with the Albany Area MPO.
Chimai,
Good morning, I'm Chimai with ODOT TPAL.
Dehan.
Good morning. Dayon with ODOT TPAL.
Is Eric Hodded with us this morning?
Hello. Good morning. Eric Hovig, ODOT, Statewide Policy and Planning Manager.
Al Hernandez.
Yeah, hi, this is Sal Hernandez, Oregon State University. My camera is not working, so my good looks are not showing.
Jason Gibbons.
Good morning. I'm Jason Gibbons with WashDOT Southwest Region.
Welcome. See, Joe Gordon.
Joe Gordon with Metro.
Also Joe with Region 1. Jolie.
Yes, this is Joe Hilgang Lee with ODOT Region 1.
Indra.
Sarah Kendra Martinenko from the Salem Kaiser NPO.
Yeah.
Leia Kagawa with ODOT TPAL.
Lemon One, Portland State, and also coordinating, one of the coordinating team along with Kyle Hawker and Garth for the Oregon modeling user group.
Sharon Ju. Mike, not working. Why, Sharon, you. Shen Chu.
Good morning, 深区 ODOT TPAL.
Kelly. Washington County.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. Steve Kelly with Washington County.
Sylvan Hoover.
Sylvan Hoover, ODOT Climate Office.
Taya.
Taya Patton with Oregon Metro.
Trisha Tanner.
Trisha Tanner with ODOT TPAL.
Tyler.
Yeah, Tyler Diekey with the Bend MPO.
That's everyone. Did we miss anyone?
Yeah, Tara Widener with the Oregon Department of Transportation Climate Office.
Or sorry.
Natalie Lillianwall, ODOT Air Quality.
Anyone else?
Bastash, ODOT Urban Mobility Office.
I think we're done. Thanks, you guys.
Very good. And just the last person was Andrew Bastach, UMO office from ODOT. I know you were a little quiet, Andrew, just FYI.
Oh, I also see Zahora joined also. Zahora, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Zohra Sultana ODOT TPAL.
Well, very good. You're always sometimes hesitant to do that. You don't know if it's going to get out of control or not. So that was very well done, Carol and everyone else online. I appreciate and that is also nice too, obviously getting the face to the name. So yeah, appreciate that. And yeah, for folks, probably good to have the agenda handy. I think we'll just kind of go through our next agenda item, which will be a series of updates before in the morning, series of updates from some of the main efforts that's being facilitated through OMSC. I know, sorry, I have to say this joke because I know for some of my staff, sometimes they'll say, "Oh, my manager's here, I gotta be on my best behavior." Well, now my manager's here, so I'm also gonna be on my best behavior. So it can go both ways there. But yes, we'll move forward in the agenda to the next agenda item, which will be from Alex. And just a little bit context before handing it over to Alex. Obviously there's been a big effort with activity-based modeling. I know that Alex is leading a lot of those efforts on ODOT side with, of course, other staff here and also staff through OMSC too. And there's been a contract for the design work to estimate the ABM models, and that's kind of wrapping up. There's a big chunk and big effort that's being done there. So I think you'll provide an update there on maybe some future steps. And then also, just as an FYI for folks online too, we developed an informational brochure to educate folks on the activity-based models. And I'm not sure if you can do this or not, but might solicit input on that too. So if folks haven't seen that, feel free to look through that informational brochure. I know that Carol sent that out along with the meeting invite. And with that, I'll transfer the floor to Alex.
Yeah, well, summarized, those are exactly the bullets I hope to cover here. Carol, could you bring up the Excel file, the Excel spreadsheet? It's very large. I don't like that one.
I didn't have my spotlight.
We haven't thought of that. So I was gonna, oh no, sorry, the spreadsheet file, if you, do you have the, Excel file? Let's see, I can try and get that while I'm talking, but, so I wanted to bring up the timeline because just to kind of make sure that everyone, just to back up a little bit with the context, I was, I don't know if everyone in the room, I think Chris Johnson gets a lot of the credit for, forming the, this plan to kind of jointly estimate the activity-based models in the state of Oregon. And so I just wanted to kind of bring up a little bit the timing for that. Sorry, thinking about. Let's see.
Oh, no, she did send it to me. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. It's not that impressive of a spreadsheet. It was just basically to show that we've got kind of two things that are converging, and I think that help make a lot of sense for why the OMSC is attempting this joint estimation. So one, we have this once every 15 years opportunity with the travel survey that Joe will talk about. We'll update on in a couple of agenda items. Yeah, thanks. And I saved it low, but if you could scroll up to the top of this file, just to, we don't have to look at the detail here, but at the bottom, those orange bars are showing different OHA's processing steps, the collection, and then the eventual delivery of that. And so that's all going to be by the end of calendar year 2024. We're planning for. So we have that effort that's happening where we're going to have across the state, which is somewhat unique. I don't know, maybe Ohio. I don't know how many states do it across the survey collection across the state.
Ohio really stuck to their MPOs, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Joe, I don't know of any other statewide. Maybe Arizona, because they have a statewide model.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. Right. But yeah, somewhat unique that we have this opportunity to have where we have all the survey data that's the same vintage, the same data dictionary across the state. So we have this ability to pool this data that happens every currently on every 14 or 15 years. And along with that, the colorful rainbow bars up on top are an attempt to show kind of RTP cycles. And, we might not be able to hit everyone perfectly, but basically, we're all of the MPOs are in the state are in this, reoccurring process to update the RTPs. And so, we're working to capitalize on the survey data, estimate a new set of travel demand models in an activity-based model format, and we're working to time that out as best as possible to start to prep for the next round of RTPs coming up and tracking that process. So like I started with, you know, I give a lot of credit to Chris Johnson for you know, kind of initially getting us started on this path and moving us towards a joint estimation where, you know, we could have all been you know, planning to use the survey data in our own separate development efforts. So you know, I think we're on a great path there. So there wasn't, you know, I might, if you could just minimize, I don't think there's much more I want to talk about related to this, but we might want to bring it up later. So, well, now that I had you minimize it. No, it's okay. You don't have to bring it back up. But all I was going to say is, I think on that schedule, maybe, yeah. So on those gray bars, the lot row 32, we got model design. And so pretty much on schedule. I think we have it ending in May-ish or June-ish, so that we've finalized all the discussions. We're in final review, and that final 200+ page design document that I don't know, we could take a vote around the group, but here I think it's pretty well put together. Will be wrapped up and will be available. I mean, it's available now, but it will be available kind of in a final form for anyone in the state or, you know, nationwide that wants to review it. So that's coming probably in May. That'll be done. So we're finalizing that phase. That gray bar. We moved into design, or moved past design. You know, as the survey data becomes available, we're getting prepped now, contracting, ready to move into any pre-work that has to be done before estimation, and then estimation. So it's the next phase we're entering in late 2024, moving into 2025, prepping for and then running through estimation. So that's where we are on the timeline. And then did you have Chrome or some similar, not Edge though, I don't want to open an Edge, but any other web browser on your machine? I suppose it could be Edge if we needed to. Edge.
And am I opening a link from the?
No, I was just gonna have you type in a Google search. Yeah.
Go for it.
If you just GitHub SIMOR. Yeah, SIMOR. I just wanted to show off. So we have, with additional design, we have a code repository on GitHub.
I'm sorry.
A SIM or SMOR for anyone that is hungry. So Kindra gets credit for the awesome name. So we have SMOR up there on GitHub, maybe. Perfect. Thanks, Carol. Oh, that's someone else's s'more.
Oh,
Oops, someone else has.
no, we gotta have our fancy logo.
I wonder what their s'more does. Oh man. Okay. Well, sorry. So if you could type GitHub. Oh, is this because we're an Edge? Probably no, it's Yahoo. Oh, that's the problem right there. GitHub GitHub ORMSC. No, is that us? OR. It's OMSC with an R in it. So OR.
MSC?
MSC. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. And then space similar. That should get us there. Maybe. Yeah, I might struggle with it. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, now we're the first one. That's the better s'more. And it's better, obviously, because of the photo, thanks to Peter Bosa. So if you scroll down a little bit for the photo contest winner, there we go. So we got
generative AI.
Right.
Love
So
it.
we have a code. Sorry, what was that, Tara?
Love it.
Oh, yeah. So we got s'mores up on GitHub, and if you scroll up back up, Carol, there's a wiki link in the top bar there. It's maybe hard to see. Yeah, right there. Just showing that we have the starting page for inputs and outputs and other context for, you know, what will eventually be populated on how to operate and how to set up this model. So out of the design, we have the initial draft framework for starting to document you know, use of this model. So just wanted to let everyone know that the design's coming. We have a Git repository, and then you know, the next piece is the great pamphlet that Carol helped generate So if you want to put it on this screen, and like Chris mentioned, it's also in everyone's in the Outlook meeting item. There's the agenda along with this pamphlet. So if anyone wants to read along and hopefully provide any feedback, it's still just an initial draft. But Carol, I was hoping if you just wanted to highlight some of the main pieces that are in that pamphlet.
This is the first draft, non-final, and what we did to pull this together is basically we went through your consultant's report, the report that RSG has been working with you guys on for model design, and just pulled out some of the more salient, high-level points from that. So we've got kind of an overview of why we're moving to an ABM, a little bit about ABMs and how they work, some information on the capabilities and how they pertain to some of the top analysis areas that Oregon is looking at right now. Oops, sorry. We have some information on some of the design factors and some of the scenarios that the model might be used for. And then the back page is how this effort kind of interlaces with the household travel survey project and also marries up with the national effort to develop activity support.
Great, yeah. So while that's up, I don't know, is there any any other thoughts or initial feedback about like maybe just major things that anyone would hope that this pamphlet would help accomplish, or I don't know, any quick reactions? Otherwise, more detailed comments can easily be provided via email or similar.
Who's the target audience for the pamphlet?
Well, we're thinking, people that would want to know why money or effort is being expended, like what we're getting out of it. I don't know, Becky or Chris or Carol, if there's any other thoughts on.
I was thinking people like, Matt and Al and Chris's boss or boss's boss.
Eric's on the phone, right? Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. So like Eric, we need money.
For people who have somewhat of a technical background, at least enough to understand.
It's a resource that's needed.
Yeah.
It helps them make a case to the people with the real money.
Okay.
I need this money.
Sure. I'm just thinking if we're reviewing it, it's good to know who the audience is.
Also, I guess I haven't thought about it exactly this way, but I know, for some of our past modeling work, like when we're sharing results like attack meetings and things like that around RTPs, people might want to say like, well, what is this model? So I think maybe this pamphlet, I haven't quite thought about it in this light, but hopefully this pamphlet would also be something we could point people to like, here's more information, like easy entry level information about the model if you're interested.
That was the perspective I was looking at up front, because we've shared that older pamphlet with our TAC as well as our policy boards.
So that's the other MPOs, RMPO, MIMPO that work with because they have a particularly Southern Oregon activity-based model, they want to explain to the tech members, council members, so they use them quite often.
And I really like that table because I think there's been conversations about what the older model couldn't do as well.
Yeah.
And so to see that comparison is really nice.
We have a set of one-page documents at Metro that are mainly for the public, like a lay person. And we have one that's on ABM. I'm wondering, I should see maybe there's a way to update it so that it's a complement to this document. Sure. And
yeah, that'd be great.
It could be a resource maybe that we could share.
Are those posted online for like the general public to find? And
yeah, they are. They're not easy to find, but they are online. And we have one for like our bike model. I think maybe moves or air quality, a couple others, land use model probably.
I'm not sure if this makes sense, Carol, but I know on the OMSC landing page, I wonder if it would make sense to have some kind of link to Metro's documentation from.
Yeah, or like other resources or something like that. Okay, yeah, I can work with, would I work with Carol or Becky on that?
Okay, Carol.
Okay, Carol.
So yeah, if there's any other, yeah, so hopefully that audience makes sense to people, but if other people have, if there's different thoughts about, well, you know, if we changed this way, it would speak to this group, you know, I don't, that's our current thought about the audience, but if there's other thoughts about how to improve that, you know, I think we're all ears. So yeah, if there's other thoughts, just, you know, chime in or let us know via email. The last thing I was going to say, I kind of already captured it, but just kind of, you know, where we're headed. Like I said, as we the OHAS results are anticipated to be delivered later this year. We're currently working on that contract to set up a series of the way the next phase of work is anticipated is like a series of 10 or so efforts that can be initiated as money or timing makes sense. And so we'll have kind of this menu of like a pre-task for estimation and estimation tasks that we can start authorizing with our consultant support team. So we're working on that, hoping that contract is ready to go in early summer. Probably it's been submitted to ODOT contracts, so we have the ball rolling. Just, you know, everyone I think is aware it's kind of a multi-month process to get that finalized. But hopefully we have that tool available, that we have that functionality available to us in the summer and can start work ahead of OHAS being delivered. And then after that, longer term, you know, I see that estimation work rolling for the next 18 plus months. So through the end of 2025, probably at least. And so then as we get into that 2026 timeframe, you know, hopefully we're in the space then where we can actually be, after estimation, starting to finalize models calibrated for specific regions that could actually be used in official RTP work. So maybe 2026, 2027 to start to have functioning models in this new platform, the new survey data. And that doesn't exclude, I know Metro has interest in upgrading their trip-based models. So I didn't mean to imply that OHAS information won't be usable until 2026, 2027. I know right off the bat we'll have reporting that's done from OHAS and then you know, initial uses in our trip-based models, but from the ABM standpoint, probably won't be ready to use until 2026, 2027. I think that's what I know. I don't know if there's any questions or anything else, Chris or Carol, or you know, anyone else in the room that thinks I should hit on.
No, again, appreciate that kind of update and also sharing that informational brochure. Sorry, Carol, I just logged on to the Zoom now. I'm not sure if there's any comments or anything worth sharing about that or anything else that Alex mentioned in the chat or
Chat, although Tia did send the link to Metro's stuff, so thank you for that, Tia.
I have a question that you may already heard the answer to this, and I wasn't at another meeting, but and again, this is like land use model thought versus maybe travel model thought, but you talk about calibration, are you also talking about validation?
Yeah, right. Getting it. Yeah. All the steps to kind of verify that we believe the information to be reasonable and that it can be used for official work. Yeah. And I guess just to that point, you know, one of the things we've talked about, you know, this all has to get phased in. But with the first ABM that we deployed in Southern Oregon, I was personally really happy with the TMIP EMAT, which is the exploratory modeling analysis tool, I'm pretty sure. Which basically is a structured way to throw, you know, thousands of scenarios at your model in an efficient way, which is great for which is great for you know, explaining things and talking about trends that exist, but it's also great when you're first deploying your model to break it before you're actually in active use. You know, when you throw 1,000 scenarios at something's going to break it. And so I do hope that after we get through estimation, we have a can we break it phase, and that would be part of the calibration validation as well.
Just as a note, we were really happy with a similar thing we did with Urban Sim, where we threw something like 1,000 runs at it just to test stochasticity and how much stochasticity was affecting our micro simulation model's results. And it was, you know, we didn't do that for all of the use of the model, but we did it just on sort of the effective randomness on the micro simulation model. It was pretty, what do you call it? Confidence building?
Yeah, definitely. Right.
Do you have a report or anything on that?
Yeah, it's in our wiki. I mean, we have a similar wiki.
Okay.
And the results of that are in like a, you know, Jupyter notebook and in some write-up in the wiki. I mean, it's not exactly a, you know, a fleshy report, but it's,
But still, that's
there's some
great.
stuff that I can
think-
get you,
yeah.
yeah.
I think we'd be very interested in that,
Yeah.
Jeff in particular, so.
Can we share that in the notes from this meeting?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's, our wiki isn't public. But I mean, not that it couldn't be, but it isn't currently. We can talk about that, but like I could grab out of it, paste into something and send, you know, send it.
We can give them access to it.
You know, they own it.
They
technically.
own it?
Yeah, vendors own it. Created it, so
Oh,
they
sure.
own it. They never transferred it to us, so something we need to work out with them, but they can add people we can't, but I can grab stuff out of it though.
That's great.
Yeah.
That seems really valuable.
And I haven't been a great housekeeper here, but you know, part of the merging in those two meetings, we don't have scheduled breaks for the morning or the afternoon. So yeah, if folks need to take a break or need to take care of business, feel free to leave at any time. And then also another housekeeping item I didn't talk about was for the virtual folks. Again, Carol's monitoring the chat wonderfully. So if there are questions, you can put it in the chat. And right now we're doing very good on time. So you can, I think if you have a question or anything like that, you can also raise your hand and we'll be sure to get that question too. Now, before moving on to the next item too, I would say that, you know, for on ODOT's perspective with the ABM and this work that Alex summarized, obviously we're moving forward, but I think we're doing things as much as possible also with the rest of the MPOs and through OMSC. So I do hope that you all kind of feel that way too. And so I was going to mention with the brochure thing, I'm kind of interested in how other folks might be using it, and obviously kind of gearing towards something that everyone can kind of use as a good little tool that way. Yeah, go ahead.
Thoughts popped into my head about the brochure is that I really like the matrix where you got I was gonna suggest that because I didn't have my glasses, I couldn't see that was there. That's really key, like so that, you know, why do this versus the kind of model we've been doing for many years. And some people won't have been caught up to that whole conversation. But the other is maybe anticipating resistances a little bit and not necessarily explicitly saying, hey, if you have this resistance, here's the response. But like just keeping in mind, what are the things that are probably going to be resistances from your least, you know, accepting party, basically, that would be in the audience for sure. And then seeing if you think you've already set yourself up to address some of their concerns in the brochure.
Okay, yeah, no, yeah, we'll suggest it. Yeah, thanks.
Sometimes that helps.
Yeah, definitely.
Blindsided later.
I appreciate it.
So everybody would have a different experience with that. It would really help if you would send your experience to Alex and Carol. Because ODOT, you know, is a different target, so to speak.
Right.
But, you know, local governments, you've got different people that are interested in what you're doing. And
Might say
Be around like what costs are anticipated and what stuff.
Yeah, that popped into my mind. Also computing resources and stuff.
Well, and I'm thinking of all the traditional large model, complex model concerns of like, do we really know this thing is reliable?
Sure, black box.
Black box, yeah.
Is there an expert review of the model or a peer review that's scheduled as part of the model development? I'm just wondering if, I think that in itself could maybe alleviate, but it's difficult. Where would that occur? Like, would it occur after the statewide estimation of the model?
Or individual.
Or when you're rolling it out to the individual MPOs and you've got the
I think
actual
it might be
application?
good at individual.
Right.
I mean, there's gotta be some part of process that's gonna have a review
Well, I mean,
framework that's void of the data. Region.
I think you could definitely use more dedicated thought. So yeah, so it's a great suggestion, and I do think, you know, I could see, you know, both on like as we're finalizing models, but also I would imagine we could pretty easily tap on some of the activity sim partners to, you know, weigh in on the estimation, like what coefficients looks like, things like that. Like if it just seems like, you know, we're considering things properly, but then we probably would want it at a kind of a final, is this thing ready to use?
Like an OMSC level.
Yeah, and
We
we
used
probably
to do that now.
right. We could probably lean on peers that are already in this conversation within the state, like, okay, like Metro's doing it and we're all watching it. So but we could probably also bring in others, like maybe PSRC would participate and I don't know.
Not vested interest folks in the state, but like BSRC.
Yeah.
Other cogs up, down West Coast, let's say.
Yeah.
I would say 2 rounds would be a good idea.
Sure.
One that's right after the statewide is calibrated, validated, and that brings in the more generic, sort of broader expertise.
Right.
And so that you do it just after the local ones, then some people will tune out because it's too localized.
Sure.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Whereas they have very specific concerns for their area, so that'd be good to engage them.
Yeah, I think peer review is always like it's one of the things that's on the Tech Tools charter, but I appreciate the mentioning it because I haven't put a lot of dedicated thought to it. So great. Yeah, we probably could start lining some of that up.
That's a long way towards acceptance.
Sure.
Yeah.
It does take a while to kind of get that all organized. So yeah, not too early to think about it.
Well, very good. Don't mean to cut off again. That's great thoughts and great discussion. Just a quick, is James Powell online?
Hi, folks.
Yes, indeed. Well, thanks. Yeah, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is James will be providing an update. Again, a little bit of context. I'm probably not the best person to provide this context. Before I got to ODOT and before as part of OMSC, we had a GHG modeling subcommittee. I think this was in 2019, 2020 timeframe, and there were several recommendations out of that subcommittee. And one of them is something that James will be talking about, the vehicle emission rate assumptions. And I know James been working hard and personally working, I think, on a lot of these aspects of it. So I'll probably just, give you the time and the floor, James, for your update.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Hi, everybody. I wish I could be there in Eugene. That is not my first slide. That's my first slide. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, cool. So yes, I've been toiling away in the data mines to try to pull together a picture of the greenhouse gas rates in Oregon. I'm going to talk a little bit about it today with an overview of the model that I'm using and look at the results that have come out so far. We're doing greenhouse gases for, obvious reasons that everybody already knows about. This was just a fresh article I thought was interesting. It's a new price of carbon. I think that's higher than I've seen in the past for a ton. The estimates are going up. And so it's going to matter. It's, as was mentioned in the introduction there, it's been laid on our table to calculate these rates for the on-road, the important on-road sector, which is the biggest sector of emissions overall, in the OMSC Greenhouse Gas Committee. And so DQ picked up that job because we have the moves expertise and because we decided in the OMSC to do it that way, a single source for these rates. And please feel free to interrupt with any questions. I know your minds are so great and active that I'd love to hear from you. Let's see. We're modeling based on this MOVES model. It's an EPA. It's the best available model for this kind of work. They are continually tooling away at it to capture the best understanding of what the fleet is doing and will be doing into the future. So this is the newest one from August 2023 and has some new rules from the EPA. And there are yet more new rules. We just had the phase 3 for heavy duty rollout. So they're working on MOVES 5. I just got invited to beta test MOVES 5. So we'll just keep on tooling at this. And that is sort of the nature of this work. It's going to be a moving target. as especially looking at those future years. We are proceeding to wrap up this sort of version 1 of the rates. We want to deliver rates that are useful to people in this room and to anybody who needs them, to the public. We're just trying to wrap that up now, but we're being held up by a moose bug. I'll show you in a minute. So the sources that we're using are sources that we already are making for the EPA, for the use in the NEI. We do more work than most states in giving the EPA summaries based on our DMV records, and we give them really detailed breakdowns of the age distributions by county, for example, which matters for the rates because rural counties tend to run about a year older on their vehicles, and the vehicle mix is different too, of course. We have 2 scenarios right now, I think, that as many people seem to want to just have a rate, like there's a nationwide, I think I have a picture of something around 200 grams per mile for a passenger car in the nationwide average. That I might be off by 100 or so there, I don't remember it, but so something like that you can just say, well, that's how many grams is coming in, and compare that to your cost of carbon or whatever, and and multiply it by your VMT. So I have tried that. This is brand new. Like I just did this for this presentation to see if I could get some kind of number out, and but people do want that. I think they want that simple number, but that's not been the bulk of the work so far. So this is an example of the Moves user interface, and you can have Moves aggregate or not. Basically, Moves will do a lot of the aggregation for you. In this case, I am asking it to summarize, but keep the regulatory class detail in there because Alex and Bettinardi, who spoke earlier, supplied this the VMT with this breakdown and gave me this sort of map of the VMT, focusing here on the Federal Highway Association 13 class groups. This thing needs a better name, and I wish it would be like an ISO standard or something because it's hard to, but there is really only the one. I think everybody understands what you mean when you say that. The classes. So I apologize for the ugly code here, but like I said, this is just a back of the envelope kind of thing to see if we can do it. It looks kind of okay. So this is the VMT that I was given, we gave to the EPA, and these are 2035 rates, annual emissions in grams per mile with the regulatory class ID from Moves broken down. And it's just so back of the envelope, I got 67 grams per mile for a passenger car and $5 grand for the heaviest trucks. And those are both correct to an order of magnitude, but they're off, they're not right. So that's the idea though. We can presumably fix that and get a pretty good, I think, summary result based on that. And we can compare that, but to really understand what Moves is doing, Moves is, as it produces those numbers, it's doing these detailed, it's calculating these rates in a very detailed way of, really stimulating what's going on in the cylinder. We can get way up in the cylinder of the vehicle. And so that's been the main body of work, and it is their hyper detail there. 500 megabytes worth of output for every county for every year. Because I'm using Moves 4, I had to solicit from the EPA the compatible starting points, the county database, the demographics, the vehicle distribution. Basically what happened is what I'd given them for 2020 NEI, they aged it a little bit. They simulated another year of change in that and used it for the NEI. But when they do that, they only do it for representative counties. I have only these handful of county databases that are functional in Oregon, and they use it, and I'm using it too, to capture the whole state. So these numbers show that this one is responsible for 15 counties in the state, and so that covers the most number of counties. Is that one single county there? which I believe is Douglas. Yeah, that's Douglas County. So, and then moving on down, oh, I'm sorry, that's Lane County. Douglas is the next one down. So between those two, I've captured, 28 counties in the state. And so that's the idea. So far, that's what we've been running with. I just got statewide county databases, so I don't have to do this anymore, but that's what I've done so far. So the output from that, so those counties, I'm trying to capture as much of the state as possible so that I could answer questions now based on that distribution. Natalie, I don't know if she's here, but Natalie Lillienwald has been my collaborator on this, and she came up with this way of presenting the data, and I like it a lot. So this is showing on the x-axis our speed bins ranging from less than 2.5 miles per hour in the 0 or 1 range, and then up to just going up by 5, up to 72 miles an hour at the top. So this curve is familiar to people who do emissions modeling. It's just what we all know about greenhouse gas, I think, is that it's got a sweet spot in the middle where you are emitting the least when you're going some sort of reasonable speed. But when you're going faster or slower than that, then the rates change and they go up. So it's comforting to see that those sort of, I think of a shepherd's crook kind of shape in the output. And then we see the growth as the vehicles get heavier. These numbers just are heavier and heavier vehicles, from motorcycles, passenger cars, and all the way up to those heavy duty trucks at the 62 end. There are motorhomes and school buses and whatnot in there. But it's a pretty monotonous kind of increase in weight as they go up, and the rates go up. So that's comforting too. Again, we're seeing, the patterns that we would expect to see in the rates. They check out with that sort of EPA estimate of an average, and they're not right though exactly. The fuels are doing weird things. We can see, like Natalie spotted this, that gasoline is going up, and there's just weird shape there for the 51, and moves is doing some bad things, doing that, and it's also dropping. It's giving me like single-digit grams per mile for 62, which is it's a bug that I'm working out with the EPA right now. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with it. So, okay, looking at the different counties, we see variety. Oh, this one's, I'm sorry, that's not a very good, you can't do an apples to apples, but you can with those two. I left out years that are just not right yet. They're not, this one's still not right. We see it in the 51 again, behaving strangely there. The counties are a little different, so it's showing sensitivity to the demographics of the counties. I think that is about all that we know really about all of these numbers. They're sort of right, but they're not right yet. We do have a app that is sort of ready to go public as soon as we figure out what's going on with those situations, that gives you these hyper detailed results, sort of decoded and in kind of a friendly way. This is, of course, it's too much detail for, who cares that a weekend motorcycle is getting that? It's not, that's going to be a pretty strange question for anybody to raise. So that just brings us back again to the summary rates. And my dream is to be able to give in here, we've got a data table, we've got a documentation, is to add a third tab up there for those simple rates. There's going to be a UI like this, but we'll have, and I want to do it by a calculation. I want to show the equation that says, look, we took, you've got this many or this percent motorcycles and this VMT, a weighted average, basically. using these rates to calculate, a useful summary rate for your county, because it's so transparent, because it's so traceable back to these, the authoritative numbers that are coming out of moves. So it's just obvious how the rates are done. If we trust moves to aggregate, as I showed back on that first, simple emissions slide, that's putting a lot of trust in it. I'd like to at least check their math and to see if they're, if we agree, if we all understand how that rate is being made. Because anytime anyone gives you a number, you got to ask who made that number and why did they make it and how did they make it. Let's see. So I'm just, I continue to tool away at it. The statewide county databases. I've got the starting point from the EPA now, and I will be loading that demographic data, the new data, demographic data into it for the purpose of the 2023 NEI. But then that'll also be what I will use for the rates, because that'll give us statewide sort of state-of-the-art moves for numbers. Hopefully I can figure out the simple rates problem and make that useful and deliver all of this. I want to deliver it as a package that's like stamped 1.0 and has the documentation and is in the state archive, as Sylvan Wood has asked for several times and is absolutely appropriate in asking for that. That's for the the analyst types, and then the user interface. I want to click public on that, and I kind of want your feedback on whether if once those bugs are understood, hopefully soon, whether that will be useful as it is, if anybody really wants that user interface to go public yet. So that is all I had. Thank you very much to my reviewers here who have supported me with this expert advice and their sharp eyeballs. And I can take questions. I guess I'll leave
Yes,
aside
thanks
that.
so much, James. We were, plenty of time for questions or discussions. So I'll pause here if anyone had any initial thoughts.
My question is, think about the future. Are you applying the simple rates to the future or just apply to the existing conditions?
Yeah, the target is to get future rates, for simple and the detailed. And we want to do, right now it's just 35 and 50. Again, that was just to, to give us something to work on. And we see that it's, it's not that sensitive to year, which I think is a realistic, again, in that this compound, carbon dioxide, is through the stoichiometry of combustion is just so simply linked to the task of moving the vehicle that it's not, we don't have a lot of room to engineer better rates in the future. So we do see that, we can interpolate here and there's no major leap. I should mention that 2020 here was modeled using an earlier version of moves. And that might explain my gasoline situation. And that there's no real discontinuity though. That even given that, it's the most boring compound. It's so it's so awful to work with in that sense, and that you can't do anything with it. But yeah, so we're supposed to model every 5 years from 2020 to 2050, and this is moving in that direction. These take about 18 hours each one to make those 500 megabytes of output. So it's and the process is awful. You would hate it. It's like 35 steps of manual working around different moves bugs and correcting things in the databases that they give me. It's just it's automated as much as I can, but it's not nice. It takes me a while to set up every run. And so it's just as they come back, and we've got one dedicated processor for it. So they're coming out kind of as fast as they, I try to keep one a night going, to keep filling this in. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Probably more than.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And good. Any other? Oh, there's a hand raised, I think.
Tara.
Oh, Tara. Yeah, go ahead, Tara.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, like one of the reasons I've been working with James on this is to provide a way to transition from our travel model outputs. So say you're running an RTP, you're getting out, VMT and a bunch of other outputs. Could you get greenhouse gas? And if you have a moves model, like you're in Metro, you can do that because you run moves and you work with DEQ on the side. But for other areas that don't have that, can we get, and we were doing this on the STIP and other reasons that you would not necessarily want to run moves, you could use these simplified emission rates. And we've been doing that, James has two things in here, these really simplified rates that are like the whole population in, a light duty vehicle. And we're trying to get a little bit more of the nuance of these more hyper detail, which particularly, the dimensions that are changing. You can see the vehicle mix here changes depending on what class you're in. And then also it changes by speed. So trying to pull those dimensions in, which we actually can get for the most part from our travel models. We don't quite know the vehicle type, but we can go onto the roadways and understand what the classification is of the vehicles on those roadways in terms of just maybe 3 classes. So I'm going to put in the chat here the dimensions that we have used in the past and what I'm kind of trying to get to a place where people could ask for, hey, can we get greenhouse gas on our travel model as an output? And, like I've worked with Alex and Natalie that we've worked through a way to get output from the travel model that ends up to be by 3 vehicle types and the 16 speed bins and the 5 fuel types. Those actually kind of are just assumed consistently based on the vehicle types. So if we get this information in VMT bins, then we can get emission rates that are sensitive to all those things and come up with a pretty decent greenhouse gas measure. So this is not different for air quality. It's not a conformity, but it's a way to pretty simply get to that. So what I was hoping is that there'd be a middle ground in here that's available on the Our Shiny app that people could pull down these rates and understand how the outputs of their travel model would need to be processed to match those together. Right now, I think we're still in the process of getting that together. We did apply it, and you'll hear this afternoon when we talk about the federal greenhouse gas rule. We did apply it in Corvallis real recently, and so that's kind of the use case that I'm trying to make more available to people if they're interested in doing that. At this point, it's probably something that you're asking myself and Natalie and Alex, like, hey, want to do this? Maybe it's a model request, not sure how to do that. But anyway, that's where we're trying to go, is that, hey, I can run my travel model and I also want an outcome that's GHG, but I don't have moves, or I don't want to run moves. And then we could use these rates that would come out of DEQ having developed these emission rate tables out of the moves model. So that's the use case I'm shooting for. And I hope that's shared by others, and would welcome any thoughts as to whether it is, or you have other ideas of what to do on this front.
Thanks, Sarah. So Ted, do you think that as I showed it would be useful? I mean, it has rates, and it has the sorry, system's being slow. That it has the the potential to answer those questions, and like you can look at this column, and of course there are many more values, and kind of get a mental average out of it, So would it, I mean, do you think that by itself, as we see it here, would be useful to open up? Should I go ahead and do it once I'm confident in the quality of the data?
I think it still needs some hand-holding as to how to aggregate those.
So you want to get that 3rd tab in there with the sample calculation. Yeah, I agree. It shouldn't be a big reach to get that in there, I think. It's just a weighted average, in my opinion. Yeah.
Across, a number of areas, a number of days, different seasons. We're knowing that stuff doesn't vary as much, and so we're willing to collapse those areas. And so until we can kind of simplify that down to map to our travel model output, I think it's too much to ask people, and so they'll have to make a request.
Yeah.
But if we can get there, that would be. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I wanted to ask a question with regards to the amount of detail included here. If I'm understanding this presentation, James, you show that that at least at a temporal scale, so the 2035 to 2050, the emission rates aren't changing much, right? And to me, it seems like that would show possibly the greatest amount of change, just given the assumptions behind fleet fleet mix and miles per gallon, EPA like required CAFE standards and whatnot. So I'm wondering if that has very little change, what amount of change are we seeing like in different, like geographically across the state? Is there really that big of a difference between Portland Metro and like a rural Malheur County? Or like or I'm just wondering if there's a way to like simplify this, if all this detail isn't necessary, if there's a way that maybe we could simplify. And I'm also thinking back to, Tara, the presentation of, I don't know if it was last week or a couple of weeks ago, on your work with the US DOT GHG reporting that you did in the Corvallis Albany area. And if I recall correctly, you did an example where you used the US DOT provided GHG emissions rate that's just kind of a generic national rate, and you tested that against a Corvallis Albany specific set of emission rates from like the moves output, I would expect. And I don't think there was much difference between the two methods. So, okay, so I'll stop. There's a lot there. I guess I just want to know, like, how much more bang for the buck are we getting with all this additional detail?
Okay, first off, a really important question or comment that you're highlighting is, this is just the ICE vehicles. This is just the combustion vehicles. So that's the weighted average we talked about, is to make some assumptions about where we will be in the fleet that's running around on our roads in terms of its EVs. EVs in moves, electric vehicles in the moves model, are tailpipe free, right? There is no carbon emissions at the tailpipe for an electric vehicle. So that's all of what James has talked about is combustion vehicles. So if you compare combustion vehicles today versus the future, not a lot of change. So that's in his data. From the data that we are talking about with Corvallis, we'll talk about it this afternoon, but the differences we are finding is in today, where there's not there's a couple percentage of EVs different, us versus nationally. So you're not seeing a lot of difference in the methods today, and we do account for the EV percentages when we do that. Well, it's tailpipe, so the EVs are not part of that as well. So I think the key comment to you is they are different, but it's because the EVs are coming into this. There are some, but then I guess it gets back to your second question of, is there enough change in the combustion engine side to go to all this hyper detail? And that question might remain, but I think it's really important to note that this does not include the EV share that has not been accommodated in this as it stands.
Right, you're right. Yeah, thanks, Tara. That's a perennial thing that when looking at these data, everyone's like, does that include the fleet mix? And that's because it's rates. You always have to go back to the fact, no, it's what's coming out of the tailpipe. It does show, I did statewide analysis of those 2020 because I have statewide results for 2020, and that is kind of obviously slightly sensitive to the weather. Otherwise, again, it just doesn't really budge that much. So yeah, and to your point, in general, all of this detail is just not that relevant because it doesn't change that much. And that, again, I think makes sense because of the stoichiometry of combustion. As I mentioned, I just love saying that. Stoichiometry of combustion. And then the CAFE standards, I'm surprised too. I want to see a bigger drop off in these rates over the years. But I'm just not sure that we have I mean, they're dropping the mile per gallon CAFE standards, but they're expecting to make that up with EV mix into the fleet. They're not, the backstory, since the 70s, we've made enormous gains through engineering on the pollutants that come out of the tailpipe. And we have made, gains in miles per gallon. Those were, I think, the low hanging fruit, though. I'm not so suspicious that this should be dropping more over time. I think that cafe standards are not. I think this is probably pretty reasonable. But it's just.
And if you went back to the 70s, you'd see those big changes, but those are now stabilized.
Right. That's my take on it.
Peter, does that make sense in responding to your comment? And is there still sort of a comment of the, return on investment for the detail?
It does, and I appreciate the comment on the fact that the moves is not considering the fleet mix per se, the fuel type fleet mix. It's basically just assuming ICE. And so that makes me wonder if, like, in our future year scenarios, if we've been employing the wrong methodology where we're taking all the VMT and spreading it out across those speed bins and then applying the moves emission rates across those speed bins, if a first step might be determining what percentage of the VMT is actually EV based, and then
that that's a super important assumption to be made in the moves analysis these days, is what is your percent EV? It's just a couple percent now, so you won't be that far off, but certainly by the future, that'll be significant. And so, yes, needing to be clear of what we're sharing when we're sharing it. And I know that when we have done work, we definitely put a percent EV. And so you're basically weighting 0 tailpipe for, whatever EV share, and then the moves tailpipe emissions grams per mile for, 97% today kind of thing. And so we do a weighted average. So the things that we have reported out on the STIP and on the federal greenhouse gas rule, Natalie has taken that into account. And I'm assuming you guys have done that too in Metro. I just can't vouch for that. But it is a very important number, and a number that we don't really know looking into the crystal ball, right? There are requirements on sales, but then you have to go through the turnover and say, well, where are people buying vehicles? And so there's a lot of, there's a range of uncertainty about what that's going to be in the future. It's definitely going to be quite a bit different than today, but, on an exact number, people can differ. So, and I think there's a national average, and then we have much more stringent DEQ requirements that are tied with the 10 or 12 states that have the California exception. So it's challenging to, people come and pull the national average, and that does not reflect our laws in our states. And so kind of having to keep these couple books in some sense, and all the footnotes that go with it to explain what you're sharing at any one point.
Thank you, Tara and James. Appreciate it.
Because I think air quality conformity still has to go back and use the official national stuff. But if you're not in conformity, it's probably best to use your state stuff, which, can be significantly cleaner in terms of carbon and such.
And thanks, sorry, I was just gonna say, for time, I'll probably move on to the next agenda item, but yes, thank you so much, James, and also Tara as well. Thanks, James. And the next, again, in the morning, we're providing updates from some key work items that's being facilitated through OMSC, and none probably more successful really than the Oregon travel study. And so firstly, I just want to thank the leadership team from the travel study. So that's definitely Joe, Callie, and also Becky. I think again, the leadership you all had really making study very successful. Every time Becky kind of gives me updates, I'm like, oh wow, this is going really well. This is amazing. All right, very good. So yeah, I think I'll just hand over to Joe to give us an update on how the Oregon travel study is going.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, good. With that setup, I'm glad I don't have any bad news for you. And I hope you're all able to downshift your brains a little after that last presentation. We're about to get a lot less technical. But yeah, we have quite a bit to share. And as always, it's an exciting time in our world in the Travel Survey Subcommittee. As Chris mentioned, we have a leadership team of Becky Knutson, who's here from ODOT, Kelly Clark, and myself, and also a shout out to our partners in Southwest Washington, Mark Harrington. We try to keep our efforts in parallel. So as Chris says, and Alex earlier, it's awesome to have this coordinated statewide effort, and we even go beyond that because, of course, in Portland Metro, our travel patterns are very much interlinked with Clark County and Southwest Washington. So, you know, our purpose here, our primary purpose is to develop this sort of foundational data set that, as Alex's diagram neatly showed, is a key cog in all of our model development process. And it's also an important baseline for a policy setting. Because people have been hearing about the survey, folks inside Metro and around our region have been asking me a lot, when are we going to get some of these updated rates? We've been dying to know how things like household trip rates have been changing, mode shares, trip distance profiles, and you know, all that comes from this survey too, because it's a survey of what people are actually doing and it's representative around the state. I think we can go to the next slide. And I wanted to give you this as a slice in time timeline. I don't want to suggest that there wasn't a lot of groundwork laid before spring 2023, before my time. And that was, again, Chris Johnson's name came up earlier. He was instrumental here too, along with Kelly and Becky, ODOT in general, and all the MPO and other partners around the state. The reason this effort's been so successful is that the hard work has been going on since, you know, T-minus 10 instead of right as it was starting, and really back to the last OHAS, which was a great survey in its own right at the time back in 2010, 2011. But now here we are. I just wanted to situate everyone who may not be as attached to this. In spring of 2023, we went into the field with what's we're calling the Oregon Travel Study, OTS. It's very hard for those of us that were in the OHAS world to not say OHAS, but I try. And in this past spring, we started with a pilot survey, which was really important because there was a lot of uncertainty in general and then post-pandemic about recruitment, how recruitment would go, how were people going to respond to a survey in this new era. And we tested and refined our recruitment and incentive options for households to participate and learned quite a bit, and ended up, you know, it has made a big difference. You know, they're percentage points, but percentage points are huge when you're trying to get a sample like this around the state. And we also designed it so that we were ready to go. We had the questionnaire ready. So those households will be part of the final sample, but we were also still learning from them. So we got about 2,800 households from the spring pilot. We were very interested to see, I'll talk a little bit more about how this survey is different from past ones, but about 50% opted into our 7-day data collection via the OurMove smartphone app, which is huge, of course, from a data perspective versus the traditional 1-day diary. That data set was delivered, and I think some of you on the call, I know, and some of the broader friends of Travel Survey Subcommittee reviewed that pilot data set and provided some great feedback. I mean, we heard from the consultant that they were impressed with the level of detail of some of the feedback. They've taken that, and most of it is going into improving the documentation, the user documentation. Some of it will go into the actual data product itself, and some of it has been tagged for potential feature enhancements. So thanks for those of you that helped out with that effort. This past fall was what we termed our main survey collection here in Oregon, and that netted us an additional around 10,500 households that completed the survey. Again, the rate was even up a little bit, a little over half went for the 7-day OurMove option. There were also web and even call-in options for those households that didn't want to participate by smartphone or for 7 days. So that we didn't get a data delivery from that, but we did get a huge metadata delivery. So we had a great dashboard, which I know some of you have accessed, that showed us sort of in real time what the recruitment was looking like by geography, by demographics, by the different types of location, the urban, rural, but also even more detailed than that. So our plan there was then to take that information, see where we were lacking, where we were running ahead or behind on the sample, and then make some adjustments for this final round, which has kicked off. It's happening right now. Spring 2024 is our final in the field data collection. And it's going to be going on until basically school out, early June, late May, early June. And we're estimating, based on the previous rounds, an additional about 8,500 households via the address-based sample. That's our random sample process. But then we also have some supplemental samples going on. In concert with that, we have the 3 major universities in the state are participating and getting additional students, which may be left out, some of them, of the address-based sample, especially those living on campus. We're also working with transit partners and some community-based organizations to reach some both important on the transit side and hard to reach on the CBO side population groups. So that's what's happening now. And for those of you that are like James and are good at quick mental math, you'll notice that this adds up to quite a bit more than our initial estimate of. We were aiming for 20,000 households total. About 16,000 of those would have been in the random address-based sample, but we're running well ahead of that by our current collection estimation, which is, again, a testament to the work that's been put into it and the kind of careful stewardship as the process is going along, and a great partnership, I would say, with our consultant partners at RSG. So we're really excited about that, and that opens up some additional opportunities I'll mention in a moment. But late 2024, roughly speaking, is our date when the final data delivery will start to occur, and that'll be the fully weighted complete survey data set that will then feed into the joint estimation stream, create all of these, a policy baseline variables, allow us to compare to past surveys and all of that. So pretty exciting times. We're getting close to when you guys will have some data and sink your teeth too. The next slide we can go to. Possibly. Uh-oh. There we go. So this is, every edition of a statewide household travel survey is a special edition in some ways, because it is such a huge effort, and it hasn't happened every year, obviously, or the last one was 2011 or so. This one is, though, it's state of the art for sure. For the first time, we're getting multiple days of data, as I mentioned. So 7-day smartphone participation option, which gives us GPS traces over that whole period. There were other options, as I mentioned, but this is, and the timing couldn't be better, right? Because think of your travel trends on a weekday to weekday basis compared to sort of pre-pandemic. I think those shifts within the week are going to be much stronger, and we're going to have the data to support analyzing that. This one, I think, is also special in the particular focus on reaching the hard to reach groups. Not that past surveys haven't tried to do it, but this one even took it up a level or two to really try to make this representative of everyone in the state. And this started before any surveys went into the field with some focus groups and other efforts just to better understand not travel patterns, but a step back, just the barriers and motivations to participating in a travel survey like this among groups we were interested in getting involved. And out of that came some good guidance, and we tweaked some of our recruitment materials and the survey instrument itself. We are also doing several levels of strategic sampling to try to capture these groups. So we're doing compensatory sampling by area. So oversampling areas, we anticipate the response rates will be lower. Things like a high percentage of low-income households or non-white households, which tend to track lower on survey participation for lots of reasons, most of them systemic. And then even beyond that, within those areas, so that gets us, we're going to oversample within, say, a block group or an area, but then within those, we found that for very reasonable costs, we could oversample within those areas then via marketing data that's purchased separately from address based sample, so that we could try to target more surveys to these households that had lower income or other characteristics that we thought would make them less likely to participate. So I think that's been it's been great. It's been a learning experience, but also I think has really paid dividends in terms of the representativeness of our sample. It'll be great to see it be where we get to. We also have a dedicated subcontractor who is working in the equity arena around the survey and working to build these relationships with the CBOs and also just feeding us good ideas about things to think of that we might not otherwise. Creating products where we can kind of encapsulate everything we've learned for future rounds of the survey. And just a quick example of what I think are really positive results from the fall. I mean, you rarely see this, right? So in the lower income households, those with less than 35,000, say, to draw a somewhat arbitrary line, they're running at 24.4% in our sample and 24.2% in the census data, basically spot on. That wouldn't have happened without this strategic compensation in the sample. So you know, we're still learning, but I think we really made strides, and it's a very worthwhile effort.
Pat, a question on that?
Yeah, please.
So do you think, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, maybe you have some ideas, is that from incentives? Like, I guess two-part question, was that from mainly incentives, and then also were they mostly using the app, or were they doing paper versus telephone?
That's a good question. I don't think we've seen splits by sociodemographics on participation via the app, although you do get a considerably higher incentive for using the app and doing the 7-day. And that was one of the things that came out in those focus groups. That was a real motivator for lower income households. And some of the other groups participating was the level of incentive that matters, you know.
Oh, okay, so I didn't remember that. The incentive was lower if you didn't do the 7-day?
That's right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's partly to compensate the effort involved and then partly because it's, you know, it's more valuable data for us if we can get it.
Yeah, so my wife used the app and she said it was so easy. And so that's why I was curious if the ease of it was also part of the reason.
Yeah, that's the idea, is that you can get 7 days for, you know, it's maybe not equivalent of 1-day effort in the old clunky, write down every origin destination, time, all that stuff. So it's taking some of the burden off the respondent, but we still, the compensation was higher for, I don't remember the exact numbers that we landed on, but it's quite a bit more. Yeah, for
And it's like $10 per household member completing the survey. The whole household gets that amount of money once everyone fills it out. So there's like layers of incentives to make sure that they fill it out.
And some of these target households did receive an increment in the incentive as well for participating. They went through a pre-screener, and so then when they saw their incentive, it would have been higher than than a household that was higher income or
because of the focus group feedback. They were really blunt, like, I'm not doing that for $30.
I'm glad you teased that out though, Nick. I forget some of the details because we've been through so many rounds.
Yeah, I think partly the incentive, part also fun part by using the ARMU. Especially my son said, "Oh, this is fun. We've never done that." It's also because you're using this thing, you know, people say, "I track my move every time." That's fun.
Is it possible that like a lesson learned here is in the future, just offer larger incentives and then you don't have to send out as many invites to the.
That's what we're doing. I mean, we're looking for that sweet spot, right? We have a budget, so not too high, but just high enough, kind of.
Yeah.
So we'll learn this round. We used incentives last time. They were smaller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're pretty substantial. I mean, but it is interesting, you know, how far could you push that, right?
We also tested things like different mailers and size of postcards, envelope, and what works better. And that was during the pilot, but then use that, whatever worked the best, because it can get size mailer. But use that for the next round. So a lot of lessons.
Mailing cost is still a lot of cost of getting one of these surveys, and that's
and printing,
a lot. There's a lot of, and so there was some hope that we could really, you know, go with like postcard only mailers, for instance. But the old envelope still carries some weight to get something in an envelope that looks official versus looks like they want to install some gutter screens for it. Color doesn't differentiate anymore, right? Because you get all those in the mail.
Should set up a Costco.
I'm gonna watch my time, so I'll go on. But thank you for the interruption there. Good interruption. The other thing I wanted to hit, why this is kind of a special edition, is we're tied into the joint estimation process, but it's okay without the bullets. We also wanted to be sure to capture some of these emerging modeling and other policy challenges. Like I didn't even put working from home here. Now it's getting so obvious, but we're asking specific questions about working from home and ability to do that, patterns of doing that. Of course, we capture some of that just naturally in the travel data, but things about electric vehicle ownership, a ride hailing, e-bikes, micromobility, e-commerce, at the household level, participation in that, and then a really neat tied to an ongoing chain of research series of questions around bicycling attitudes and willingness to ride on different types of facilities. And we're also trying to set ourselves up for the future of this. You know, each round we want to set ourselves up for future success too. And so we're working with a consultant, and we did a broad peer review of what the state of the art and survey design is and where it's going. We're all assessing the potential for follow-up surveys, including our first one on e-commerce that's happening now. So this is taking people who have opted to, that said they're willing to take additional surveys through the survey and then participating in a more focused topical survey. And then also we're going to get out of this some guidance on how we might, if we were able and wanted to go that direction, think about more frequent rolling surveys, as a lot of regions at least are pursuing these days. So something more like the ACS data versus the decennial census idea. So you get a little, smaller chunk of data, but more often to keep up with trends. Right. Jump to the next one, Carol. Maybe we can. This is, yeah. It's ready for lunch too. So what's on deck for us next? Right now, we're really focused on wrapping up this main data collection effort and finishing strong, and hopefully continuing to hit or exceed our targets for participation. Very soon, we had some generous contingency funding, because like I said, there was uncertainty around how we were going to do getting people in. ODOT provided contingency funding, and much of that we have preserved. And so we're working now with our subcommittee members and our consultant and others to figure out how best to use that money to support our survey mission, how to make this data set more valuable, but also capture potentially questions that we weren't able to fully answer with the survey. One of those, just as a teaser, that we're likely to move forward with is a really cool qualitative assessment of travel within some of these lower income, non-white and other equity population households who did participate, but just to get more background on why they're traveling the way they did, get at like latent demand for travel and things like that. So that's likely to go forward some other things too. As we move forward, we're also revising. It's a new data set. It's got all these GPS traces. It's a bigger data set than we've had before. We're revising our data sharing protocols. We're continuing to coordinate with Alex and his team on activity sim and JE. Joint estimation needs to make sure they link up, and continuing to work with our local and regional partners to make these surveys even more equitable in the future. One of the things that has come out of one of these OMSC meetings is to start to think about how we would best engage tribal governments and native populations living on tribal lands in future surveys. And that'll probably start within ODOT and partnership with our regional NPOs, and start that discussion for future surveys. And that's what we'll be up to in the near future. I think that's it. How about that? Didn't cut into lunch after all. If you have questions now, happy to answer a quick one or two if we have a second. And otherwise, you're always free to email any of the leadership team or go through Carol, and she'll direct it to the right.
What are the purple dots?
The purple dot, yeah, this is some of the data, the sort of data that we're mulling over as we think about data sharing protocols. This is very different than just OD data, right? So we get these traces. This is LADS. I thought it was interesting to think. I happened to be eating lunch around LADS, and the LADS 500 was going on. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. So they do 500 bike laps around LADS Circle there in the center, which was going on during our data collection. I wonder if we have anyone who's tracking, and I wonder what their system's going to make of that trip. Maybe we better warn them like this 500-mile bike trip that doesn't go anywhere. But yes, that's the important slide.
One quick question or comment.
Please.
So related to the flyer or the new pamphlet for activity-based model, I think would be great. We've been trying to be really good about coming back to our policy boards with, you made this decision a year, 2 years ago, like what did we get out of it? And, you know, Becky will know it was a hard lift for both of our small MPOs to get that budget amount for the survey. So it'd be great to kind of have something that comes back and says, look at all this great data we have, your investment was worth it. And now look with Activity Sim or with the activity-based model, you know, we're gonna be able to answer all these more questions. Just as a way to promote that investment.
Yeah,
in
we
the
should
MPOs
make that
and
an
the-
action item and we can
Yeah.
coordinate with you guys if the timing helps with the ABM effort. Yeah.
The survey summary, kind of like the highlights. Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even beyond, I think that's a good point
Yeah.
about tying it in. This data is not, that's not the end, right? It's feeding into this other process on purpose. Wasn't just an accident.
Yeah. All these things.
Or at least we're gonna say we planned it, right?
The table, I think Nick pointed out, he really liked the table.
Mm-hmm.
That's key. And then we talk about how the survey is feeding into that ABM table. Otherwise we would have collected it differently for the survey. And yeah, bring it all together and explain it to them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, to, I think, Chris's point about how we plan on using those types of materials, I wouldn't imagine handing out that fact sheet or whatever to somebody to be able to digest what that ABM all is. But you can pull pieces of it for those kind of presentations to policy boards or over your audiences. So having that all in one place and easy to like translate into another form of communication is really helpful. And like the visuals are really good. The trip table visual.
Well, very good. I apologize. I'm gonna cut the discussion and the questions just because we have a quick lunch here, but yes, thank you, Joe. As Joe mentioned, feel free to contact any of the leadership team, Joe, Kelly, and Becky. So yeah, I think I'll conclude the morning part of the meeting. For folks online, yeah, we'll meet back at 1. And for the folks here in person, we'll have some lunch. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Start 1 o'clock sharp, and I think we did that. So appreciate everyone coming back. And if you look at the agenda for the afternoon session, again, a series of presentations, some more information sharing on things that, you know, are applicable to our work, maybe not as directly facilitated through OMSC as some of the earlier morning updates. So with that, I think I'll probably just go to the first agenda item. And again, a little bit of context too for this presentation. Yes, so Shen Chu is in the Transportation Planning Analysis Unit. Obviously, you all interact with TPAL staff quite a bit, but probably primarily through the modeling program. But TPAL also has 2 other programs. One's the Data Analytics and Performance Reporting Program. And Chi Mai leads that program, and Shen's part of that program. And so that program helps develop mobility-related performance measures, both at the state level and also federal reporting requirements as well. So anyway, we've been trying to use data that we have available to us, getting the speed data and volume data, and seeing really what kind of insights that we can have with that kind of data. And Shen's been really wonderful and looking at that data, presenting these really wonderful graphs. And so I thought this was a great idea just to kind of see what we've been doing, and also you all get a good idea of what that data is and how you can use that data. And so with that, I think Shen is, I see Shen. And yeah, Shen, please feel free to start your presentation.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Yeah, this work is a part of recent DAPR. We're working on the Oregon congestion white paper. I fortunately involved a part of them. Today I want to share some what we found and thought, and speed and flow and the relationship are some fundamental content in transportation. So I start with the data. We are using the data from Oregon ITS department. They called CRMS data. That means a center ramp metering system. When you drive into the freeway and some signal stop you, that's the system are working. Yeah, and this data, it had existed more than 10 years and have better and better quality and more coverage. And also it's a public, published to public, transfer through PSU portal and RITIS to share this data. And you can see the screenshot, two of them from the two websites. Actually, they are same thing. The data, the raw data is the stuff from the 22nd, and the portal and RITIS aggregate them to different time interval, use different strategy. And also is the raw data is stuff from the detector. Each detector are watching on one lane, and the people can aggregate them to station or location level. So you can see the right bottom. So the basic unit is detector ID, timestamp, include volume and speed we need, and occupancy. And we can talk about it later. And it's sport data. You can see it covered the most of the region 1 Portland Metro. It also have some in other regions. And yeah, at least they have 3 benefits using CRMS data. The first one is can extend the temporal spatial coverage. Traditionally, we often use ATR data, but they have limited amount. This page shows the 15 alive ITS stations on I-205. At the same route, there's only 3 ATR, so that could much more information for us to make some analysis. And you can see each diagram, the X is the volume, Y is the speed, and each point represents 1 hour. It's a whole year in 2022, include 8,000 points. But actually, when we analyze the data, we are using a 15 minutes interval. But when we plot to the diagram for more clear, clear to see the pattern, we reduce them to hourly. And the color is by occupancy, and we can talk about it later. The second benefit is the data itself include the lane by lane. So look at the left. If we combine all the lane together, sometimes the pattern is not very clear. But if we split them by lane, we can see a clear different pattern. So that's a research question. In many cases, we can just combine them, sum or average to do what we need. But sometimes it could be sensitive for your research, for your study, because they could have the heterogeneity issues. And the third benefit is the data include occupancy. Traditionally, highway capacity manual are using the density as a core indicator, but they also said roadway occupancy is a surrogate for density. So the roadway occupancy means the percentage of time of the road are occupied by vehicle. So you can see the left diagram. It's the occupancy versus density is roughly linear relationships, and actually the slope is represents the average length of vehicles. So, but the advantage of occupancy is it's observed data. It's not derived by speed and volume. So it's provide a new dimension. Another benefit of occupancy is that density is calculated by vehicle, number of vehicle. So if the traffic flow have some truck, long vehicle, it is still counted by number of vehicle. So look at the left, if at the bottom, if have a truck, have double length of passenger car, the density will change to 3, but the occupants still keep 4. That's will related to how the dynamic of speed and flow. So so you can see usually we use density equal 45 as a critical point to make the analysis. So in the right diagram, we still use the density, but occupancy is equivalent. We can change it to, so we can use this by the constraint of density to identify some special pattern. For example, the lane 1 it seems like never have a very high density or occupancy. Look at the photo on the left bottom. It because they have a 35 speed limit, but in many analyses we cannot collect enough information like this. We know have some speed limit, but using the density or occupancy, we can figure out some constraint or some special reasons. And occupancy could be an alternative of time windows. We often use time window in our analysis. For example, the week of day, time of day. Look at the left diagram. The vertical is a week of day. The horizontal is a full lane. We can see the weekend does have some different flow or speed, but when we analyze the relationship between speed and flow, weekend and weekday don't have too much difference. But when we look at the right, it really provide the opportunity to see different pattern by the time of day. So usually we use the traditional method, use the time window to, such as below 5 a.m. to calculate the free flow speed, use the peak hour to make a time window to capture the congestion. But time of day is associated with the dynamic of speed and flow, but time of day is not the cause. So if we use the occupancy as the constraint to capture the free speed flow, free flow speed or congestion, that could be a better alternative. So the second part, I will talk about the speed and flow relationship. So if we just look at the flow perspective, the right diagram is the time of volume by time of day, and the left is speed by time of day. So if our final goal is want to evaluate some system performance, economic impact or GHG something, we need to get VMT, VC ratio, ADT over C, and all these come from volume. But if we only look at the volume diagram, we don't know what volume is in a free flow speed, what volume is a black VMT, what is a green VMT. Another thing is volume data is expensive. We have to capture all the vehicles on the sections to know the volume. So always they have limited coverage to get volume data. So sometimes we want to use speed and flow relationship to estimate the volume. And if we only look at the speed, it have been developed, well-developed many indicators to capture or measure the speed from free flow speed to congested speed. And finally, we want to measure the performance, monetary cost of time, and mobility. But if we only focus on the right speed diagram, we don't know how much vehicle pass through. That means even at the same congestion, if 1,000 vehicle pass through or 2,000 vehicle pass through, that could be different. And moreover, we can see on the left, traditionally we use free flow speed to estimate the capacity, and as the denominator of the VC ratio and ADT ratio. That implies we are using ideal speed to estimate the capacity, the volume. So that means when we combine the two dimensions together to analyze their relationship, we can dig more information. And the left diagram is our recently work. We try to figure out how the throughput loss during the congestion. You can see the different stage. Sometimes the speed decreasing, but the flow still growing. But after some threshold, both of them are shrinking and even worse. The two color lines show the 15 and 85 and the medium. And the more we want to figure out more information for modeling or other work, we want to get some parameter or coefficient of the different stage. On the right, you can see we can divide, usually we can divide them to 4 stage. For the stage 1, we can try to get the free flow speed, use the data. And the second, we want to get the volume delay function, no matter it's linear or nonlinear. But we found that the most challenging part is between the stage 2 and 3. That the maximum point or optimize the point is very hard to capture. And I also realized the risk when we choose different MP point as the threshold. So the last part, I want to talk more about the capacity, the speed and flow around the capacity, this concept, because look at the right, if we have different options for the capacity, and if we choose C1 or C4, far left or far right, the ratio will be very different. The speed, free flow speed will not be impacted, but the rest could be very different. So when we come back to the HCM, we look at the definition of capacity. Some keyword is maximum sustainable flow rate can be expected. So look at the first one, C4 is a maximum expectation, but it cannot be expected. It's not flow rate. It's derived from the free flow speed. So it's a function of the free flow speed. So it never happened. Even we multiply some adjustment factor, essentially we want to calculate a value of the ideal maximum of the traffic flow. So the C3 is based on the data, is a maximum observed, but it is still not sustainable. It's only choose the top 1 or top 5 or top 15 is always the best performance. But we cannot assume is one-side distribution around the truth, because we know the traffic flow is decided by both demand and supply. And moreover, if we choose, it's a common choice in many analyses, but remember that if we choose C3, we observe the volume never or most of the time cannot reach the capacity. That means that we should not have congestion happen. And that's C3. And C2 is a common method in statistical regression analysis, use the most likely expected value, but it not the maximum. The classical green shell method use the parabolic curve to fit the a curve and assume the gray point is just a random error around the true curve. But recall that the regression analysis, the assumption is the IID. But look at the right, the flow over density, the gray point, it seems like not at the same stage. So it means not identical. And the point is not randomly around the curve. That means the independent assumption is also not hold. So if we release the IID assumption, we can get a very different maximum peak point of the curve and get a very wide range of occupancy or density. That means, like the picture on the right, if the gravity is not only reason, it's hard to capture the truth of the maximum. The last choice of capacity is the C1. This method is appeared in chapter 26 in HCM. It's a very very conservative choice. It's a sustainable expectation, but it's not maximum. The right picture I want to I recall a story, say in World War II, the military want all the parachute is qualified, is safe, so they randomly pick one and let the manufacturer to try, and soon later, almost 100% qualified parachute. So that may be a joke, but it implies sometimes we want to choose a conservative side because, for example, we want to control to make as less as possible the congestion happened. So this method, we try to capture the breakdown event and collect them together, feed some probability function to want to control the risk less than 15%. So that's the main idea of the last capacity option. And so at the end, today we talk about the three benefits of the CRMS data. We talk about some application and some exploration. And at the last, the capacity, talk about the capacity. Interesting thing is in highway capacity manual, one sentence says there's no simple definition for freeway facility capacity. It's true, but I can't agree. The second sentence, they say because it is a variable influenced by the time and location of active bottleneck. I think it's true, but the challenge of capture the capacity using speed flow is because we have different perspective and value. When we say when we have no enough information, we want to make some planning or design, we think a highway freeway should reach some capacity. That means C4. But after the highway is finished, we want to evaluate or calibrate narrow the gap between the reality and the ideal maximum volume. That means C3. So look at the diagram. If we want to analyze the C3, if we want to get C4, we just look at the yellow part. We just want to get the free flow speed. And if we want to analyze C3, we should just stick on the lane 2 because only that one reach the maximum. But the C3 and the lane 3 and 4 could be constrained by the downstream spillback effect. But if you make some modeling, just want to predict or simulate this section, so maybe you just choose the average of all the lanes. That means you choose C4. For the last one, if we are doing some demand management, congestion mitigation, we may just look at the purple point and orange point to try to figure out how to make the congestion happen less than before. So that's my today's presentation. And at last, we cannot cover today the data quality issue and the stochastic method and critical occupancy is another topic. And we also we want to make some corridor analysis. And please, if you have any thought, please let me know. And I'm looking forward to get more information. And if you find I'm misunderstand anything, please let me know. And at last, I want to thank our data team and the whole TPAL group, and thanks the TSM unit and ITS. All the experts give me some help, support, and guidance. Yeah, that's all.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that information. We do have time for questions or comments, and while you all are thinking about that, they just wanted to highlight again some of the reasons why we wanted to present this here is kind of bring that data that we do have. This is the data that we do have, and these are some of the things that you can do with it. When Shen started compiling those by lane, for example, kind of seeing that insights, that's actually relatively new, I think, for ODOT and those folks looking at the traffic operations perspective. And another reason why we kind of brought it here is I know in Metro's region mobility policy, there's a speed-based measure. As we go into the Oregon Highway Plan, that's going to be considered also as a measure. And so I think this is the data that makes sense to look at for deciding what that would look like. So also want to say, hey, this is kind of the data that makes sense to kind of inform some of those discussions or be a basis for some of those discussions. So yeah, with that, any questions or thoughts for Shen?
There's a question from Joseph from Hillsborough in the chat. Joe, do you want to just unmute yourself and ask?
I can read this question. So how about let me show this. So I just forgot to say, the left diagram is come from the 12 station in region 1. It is selected by our team and some expert. So it's essentially it's a descriptive statistic. It have a lot of underlying assumption. And for example, I choose some occupancy larger than 10 and speed smaller than some value, and combine them by 1 mile per 1 mph bins and to calculate the percentile. So it could be changed a lot if any assumption or method change. So sorry, maybe I cannot answer the question 35 is the best or not. It's depend on many other, it's beyond the data. It depends on many other factors. So just like I'm talk about the capacity, sometimes I feel confusing which capacity which method, which should be the threshold. So maybe some other expert can add more about this question.
For those of us in the room, Joe's question was, will this work be evaluating whether Metro's proposed use of 35 miles per hour as the freeway braking point speeds down? So that was the question.
And I could probably speak to that. Sorry, I didn't realize that was a question. Yeah, sorry, as I kind of mentioned, the idea is this is great data, and hopefully can be a good basis for even just being consistent with what congestion definition is within ODOT, and also for informing mainly the OHP type conversation. So think that Metros is that. I know that we weren't exactly involved in that, so I wouldn't say yes to that question. But again, it's mainly to inform upcoming discussions on the Oregon Highway Plan around, but again, around the speed-based measure. Yeah, any other questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead.
Can any of you all hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Looking at this, I may have missed something early on here, but from the labeling that I'm seeing, is all of the data shown here coming from just one segment of freeway within Portland? Is this all coming from the same spot on the map?
I think I can answer that, but Shen, that's a good question for Shen.
And the reason I'm asking that is I'm presuming, since we're seeing this here in this forum, that part of this is in service of really establishing volume delay functions for modeling. And I would imagine out of several hundred freeway locations in Portland, you're going to see a lot of different things, because quite often the driver of the speed flow isn't so much how much volume is on the main line, but how much of it is clogging up the ramp junctions and the weaving areas. Because as I sort of alluded to in my presentation back in December, I looked at this cross-sectionally across all sorts of freeways, and our patterns are just all over the board.
Shen, would you like me to answer this?
Yeah, it's yeah. If I miss something, please add. And my quick answer is today I show some diagram is from one location, but the throughput lost is from 12 typical stations. This page shows onto I-205. There's many different patterns, so it's really a challenge to how to get a generalized pattern or some indicator. So I'm also thinking about maybe we should not only by location, we may select some, for example, select some lane reach their maximum volume to make some analysis for capacity or others, or for other patterns, we divide them to different category, make some corresponding analysis. That I'm not sure it's answer your question.
And I can supplement that with, so we embarked on this congestion white paper. We're calling it now congestion technical memo. And so basically we wanted to build a fundamental understanding of congestion, and the very first part we want to focus on is freeways, because it's access control and the data is readily available. And we wanted to basically, for this particular graph that you're looking at that's shown, basically we have all these sites, and we picked 12 sites that had really consistent, stable data, and we picked them to represent the freeways in Region 1. So each facility had at least 1 or 2 locations. And so then from that data, we were able to create this sort of what we envision as an average. But if, all of these are example of the type of us being able to dissect the data and creating different ways to view and use the data. So if someone is interested in one facility, they can replicate what we do for that one facility or their particular area and be able to use that data in their work. But what Shen has shown earlier was from specific locations. And for this one, it's the average of the 12 locations that we compile and selected. I guess we can move on to Tara's question.
Yeah, that's exactly. I think this would be the last question or comment. But yeah, go ahead, Tara.
Yeah, right. I know we're running short on time. My question is, and I don't think I saw it in there, but there's a lot of I like this presentation. There's a lot of good stuff in here. And you ended up with some helpful things that it's going to help us with, like different understanding of capacity and congestion. But I also heard a passing reference to maybe estimating VMT. Is that, I don't think the VMT on here is estimated, if I understood the presentation right, but is that a possible outcome here as well?
We have not done that with this specific work that we have embarked on, but I think that could be a future. I mean, VMT is pretty easy to estimate if from this data with the volume and the length or the mileage. But the focus of our work has been the combination of speed flow. That's basically what's unique about this.
But in places where you don't have an ATR, you would be able to estimate from the speed and the road occupancy is what I gathered.
I would say there a lot of work need to do because ATR data have a TSM team to make QA/QC, but for ITS data, the benefit is a larger amount of real-time data, but record the pattern on I/O205. There's so many different quality issues. So today I cannot cover this part. Someday we can just talk about how to use the ITS data correctly because they don't have time to make a QA/QC to calculate AEDT, something like this.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you. Future work.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. I think Ji and Chen explained it well. Tara, great question. It's not really the focus or the intent of this work, but theoretically could be used eventually to supplement estimates or be incorporated somehow in that. But again, that's really not right now the intent, but good flag there. Also, I apologize. Every time I talk, it's either going to Matt or now it's going to Becky.
Oh,
I don't know why. I can't be in the picture.
You're in that pocket. You're a manager. You did that.
Your white shirt is like a great.
I don't know. But anyway, guys, thank you, Shen. Again, yeah, we'll just keep on moving. And I won't provide too much context for this presentation. I know for the climate friendly and equitable communities work, a lot of you are engaged in that. And we've had several presentations already from Zachary on that. There's a special OMSC work group as well on that. This was kind of focusing a little bit on the case studies work that was part of that. Again, modeling and analytical efforts that Zachary's leading, also through the contract that he's also leading. So this will be a little bit different focus, I think, than some of the other presentations that you might have heard from Zachary. But with that, yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Zachary.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? And can you see my intro slide?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. I don't think I can monitor the chat, so I will make sure somebody in the room is doing that. Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, everybody. Zachary Horowitz with ODOT, with TPAL, working on the program, the CFEC program with Teresa Conley and a number of other folks. One of our main to-dos in our scope of work for the project was a couple of case studies. We narrowed it down to doing two, one for the trip-based models in the state and one for a activity-based model in the state, which is Southern Oregon. And I'll touch on some preliminary information about that. I'm also thrilled to see so many folks online and then in the room today. It's really great to be able to present this information to you. I'll cover, given our diverse audience, I'll talk a little bit about our guidelines and process. Always with engineers, we have our process. We had a number of different important priorities to do with the modeling guidance, we're developing one, which is to implement the climate friendly areas. The second one is to calculate vehicle miles traveled in accordance with the rule. We have these two case studies, and I'll talk a little bit about next steps. For those interested in knowing what our third priority was, it's related to performance measures and standards. I'm not talking about that today, though. Our modeling goals when we started the project, and this is in some ways a core function of the revised rules in Division 12, is to come up with modeling guidance. And the guidance term here is selected purposely. It's not necessarily requirements. It builds on existing guidance. We all know, depending on trip-based or activity-based, TPAL managed or MPO managed, models are generally run similarly, but always have important differences. The new transportation planning rules in Division 12, there are a number of them. There's lots of them, but there's a few that specifically apply to modeling type work. One is the VMT definition. You see there in Section 5, Rule 64, the desire to calculate VMT per capita for jurisdictions, cities, and counties that are subject to the rules in 160. The implementation of climate-friendly rules. There's a number of different rules as part of the 300 series. Taking a look at VMT per capita is dependent on whether a transportation system plan has a new capacity adding project. That's in the 30. I'm not saying these are all of them, but these are some of the main ones that we really focused on. And the goal, one of the main goals, and I had heard this sort of from day one in this position, was to come up with a process that's consistent, repeatable, defensible in case there's challenges, and accurate. In as much as our modeling is accurate, and we know it always is. And of course, the alignment with the greenhouse gas emissions rules in Division 44. Our development process, and I really will thank a number of people online and in the room that have contributed mightily to this. We certainly could have not done it without you. This includes all the work that you've provided through our OMSC working group, plenty of meetings outside of that, work sessions, and all that best practices and advice, material you provided to us, work on the ground has really been helpful. We started off really polling that group and identifying what areas of modeling can we focus on, which are going to be impactful in terms of moving the needle on VMT per capita, as far as, let's say, implementing the climate-friendly areas. And once we developed that, we brought it into an annotated outline, fleshed it out a little bit more into our modeling guidance, and then had an opportunity of doing two case studies, at which point the consultants, DKS primarily and RSG, took a look at the guidance, used that as their template for moving through the case studies, realized information was missing, steps were incomplete, and then they were able to continually refine that. That process is continually ongoing now, and it's certainly not going to end with the close of this contract. Let's see, then again, the case studies, and I'll get to that in just a couple more slides. For the climate-friendly area integration, there's lots of different elements. For those that are maybe unfamiliar with that term, climate-friendly areas are similar to the multimodal areas, the MMAs that have been part of the Oregon Highway Plan for a number of years now. The idea here is that they're supposed to be higher density areas. They're required as part of the rules from DLCD and are effectively mixed use areas with higher density housing and employment, walkable, bikeable areas where people don't have to drive or certainly can drive less as a way of reducing VMT as part of the transportation system planning process. How to integrate them into the model really takes a look at a lot of different elements, including elements of socio-demographic data using or suggesting using the population synthesizer for non-activity-based models, Metro being a bit of an exception in that case. Figuring out how to allocate households and employment using place types, the Oregon place types, a little bit tied to vision eval to understand if we're developing areas that sort of meet a TOD or mixed use category, and then even getting down to the true nitty gritty, looking at elements of intersection density, which does tie to place types, and centroid connectors. Are they well placed do they have the right length and the right speeds assigned to them to make sure that we're making connections, especially as it relates to the active modes, walking and biking primarily. Just a brief note on the vehicle miles per capita. I think even from Shen's presentation and maybe Tara's questions, there's multiple different ways of measuring VMT. We have our method, which ties directly to that rule in Division 12, Rule 5, definition 64. These are household-based light vehicles that originate in a city or county, whatever we're doing the TSP on. We're looking at internal to internal trips, so trips from a city within that same TAZ or outside of the city boundaries, internal to within the model area, internal trips that started in a city or county that may leave the model area, and we're integrating aspects of the SWIM model, the statewide integrated model. Particular challenges in areas like in Southern Oregon where people are escaping to California, or I suppose in Idaho, or not in Idaho, but in Washington State too. And then for the non-home based trips, tying those back to specific jurisdictions, as you know, or you may know, activity-based models, tour-based models, this is relatively straightforward. One of that strength of that model, with the trip-based models, not so easy, but we seem to have figured out a method that's seems to be pretty good. All right, now what everybody's come for our 2 case studies. I'll start with Ashland first and then touch on Milwaukee, just so everybody knows. In Milwaukee, it's a trip-based model as part of Metro's MPO. The climate-friendly area is designated as the Metro 2040 Town Centers. That's actually true for all jurisdictions within the Metro area. Those count as CFAs per the rule. The non-home based trip calculation, again, trying to assign non-home based trips that are occurring outside the jurisdiction or within the jurisdiction to that specific jurisdiction is a bit of a challenge. Mostly because of Metro's process to do planning for the entire MPO. There's maybe slightly less opportunity to do some modifications from the HIAs, the household size, income, and age. In Ashland, a little bit different. It's managed by TPAL. They had 3 potential CFA candidate areas that we were looking to integrate. Those are not yet adopted, I believe, by the city of Ashland. So we were really just testing out the ones that had advanced at that point. And it says we work with the city of Ashland on demographics, and that is true. But one thing we learned from all of this work is, and I think hopefully all the modelers online and in the room will appreciate this, is the recognition that modeling takes lots of time. And since it may be a larger part of transportation system plan, we want to make sure that we have as much time and get started as early as possible if we want to have as much information available and collaboration with the jurisdictions that we're working with. And this would be true from TPAL or for consultants as well. So Ashland, these 6 steps will probably, again, be familiar to many folks. The highlighted ones in bold and italics are ones I'm going to focus on the next few slides, but basically here's our modeling process, identifying our reference inputs, tweaking some land use assumptions. Again, these are related to CFAs. We soon learned early on that just making modifications within the climate friendly areas means that we're taking population from other areas or really taking the increase in population from other areas. So looking at modifying allocations within climate friendly areas require us to take a look at the entire jurisdiction. I'll conclude a little bit with our model runs that we did for Ashland and then present some preliminary data based on those results. Some of the land use assumptions, again, we tapped city staff. They made themselves available, and we're very thankful for that. We assumed a housing capacity based on some projections that the city had as through their climate friendly area work with DLCD at 15 dwelling units per acre, which is a little bit low, but again, working with the city planners helped us develop that. Based on that information, then proportion out the remaining households and jobs. I think in this case, we assumed the employment growth within the CFA was roughly the same as the population growth there. always have to maintain our PSU totals. And then ultimately, this was a projection out for 2045 compared to the existing model, which was based on the Region Transportation Plan, and then looking at our CFA. And you can see there in the table at the top right, the modifications, the reallocations increase the population within the CFA by about 1,100. Numbers don't add to zero. I'm not exactly sure why, but I think it's just maybe a matter of a counting exercise. And then you see a corresponding decrease within the non-CFA. So effectively, from the existing conditions, the population in the CFA is expected to grow substantially faster than the non-CFA. Is that really going to happen? That's always sort of the question with predicting the future in models, but through this type of planning, this type of modeling, that's, we're looking and gazing into our crystal ball. One key point here, as far as approval from the Oregon Employment Department, that did sort of hang things up a little bit. I think that becomes a lesson learned. It shouldn't be a surprise really, but also getting all sort of the ducks in order to make sure we have our NDAs and things like that is key, and that's also one of the reasons we're providing guidelines to do modeling work as soon as possible. RSG and TPAL did 2 model runs. For the first one, mostly because we were waiting on the OED approval of the employment, we only did the population run for number 1. And the information here in bullet points may be a little bit easier to see on the next slide, where I actually have the tabular data, but ultimately, and we were expecting these 2 results, that the VMT per capita calculated for population within the CFA was lower than the non-CFA, which is a positive result and something we were certainly aiming for. And the overall decrease it showed a larger decrease from existing conditions within the CFA relative to outside the CFA, which is also really nice. At least as far as some of the specific data, that walk mode share 0.6 is not a terrible amount, but again, this is just our population reallocation. And here's the data for that. There's a lot of information here. I try to really just highlight the tables. Again, we can always make slides available afterwards. But really the area I'm looking to highlight here in yellow in the bottom right of the table, that first line, negative 1.53%, shows the decrease in the CFA scenario relative to the RTP scenario for 2045 with the reallocation of those additional population to the CFA. There's some corresponding decrease in the non-CFA, and then overall we're looking at a 1.4% decrease. Again, that's not relative to existing conditions, but that is relative to the RTP. So it shows, at least initially, for that first run, that the allocation of certain types of population to the CFA is producing the VMT moving in the right direction. On to run number 2. Sorry for sort of speeding through this. I want to make sure I can get through everything by 2. The second run also included the employment allocation, reallocation there, also a generalized parking cost of $1 per. This wasn't long-term, like overnight parking. It was just a way of accounting for some generalized parking costs within the CFA specifically. I would say mostly because of the employment reallocation, though the parking is important. There was even more positive results relative to the initial run, and that's shown here by the transit bike walk mode share. That's a combined mode share increase over 4%. Even in the non-CFAs, probably this is a lot of the TAZs adjacent to the CFAs or sort of close by, almost a 1% increase in non, at least in the transit bike walk mode share. That's of course the nice thing from the activity models, we're able to really pull that out. And then again, for the next slide, I'll show you a little bit more compared to the initial run. So again, similar data. You see run 1, hopefully it's not cut off, but you see far to the right side. And when we've added the employment, and again, this is really driving that mixed use component where people are able to travel for shopping, for retail, for work. That you see a pretty substantial decrease in the VMT per capita within the CFA, almost 5%. That brings the total Ashland change up to 2%, just over 2%. And again, we're seeing that positive effect. There's not a lot of detailed refinement in here. We know that we can go a little bit further, but again, as a case study point for Ashland, really we're just trying to show, or we're hoping we were trying to show, that the CFA itself is an effective way of reducing VMT per capita for the people that live within the area, as well as for the city as a whole. On to Milwaukee. So here was an area where Metro is running the model, and it took a lot of collaboration between this. So I think everybody on the consultant team, as well as all the Metro staff that have participated and taken some time to do this, we really appreciate it. Milwaukee had done, prior to their ongoing transportation system plan process, which was done just before CFAC became encapsulated within the rules, that they had conducted a housing capacity analysis. And one of the things that we learned, again, maybe no surprise, but to use obviously the best available data and to really have a good understanding of what kind of people are going to be moving to certain areas and what sort of housing they need. Because Metro does planning for the entire region all at once. I mean, again, other MPOs do that too, but Metro's process really dials in on some very specific aspects of population and employment. We realize that after the fact, after the RTP, is not really the time to be able to make substantial changes in a city or county or city's allocation of housing or jobs for that matter. And we would certainly encourage cities, as part of the RTP process for the next one, to really get engaged, to do their own housing assessments at a minimum, as well as maybe an economic analysis, to really see if they can have some better data to improve on better data specific to their jurisdiction to help improve and provide more disaggregate information to Metro. I will talk about the VMT per capita in a moment, but just to say it took a little time to sort of work it out, and we're still sort of verifying to make sure it's consistent with a lot of other work we've done. As I mentioned, there were a couple of recently done pieces of work that City of Milwaukee produced with help that informed some of the work in the regional model. We took a look, or the consultant team took a look and did that housing size, income, and age analysis. Took a look at what we have for 2040, compared it across TAZs. For the most part, they were pretty much right on, though they did identify a couple that didn't seem to sort of match projections for certain types of housing in TAZs, and these are really focused on the downtown Milwaukee area. The consultant also took a look at overall transit coverage, intersection density, again, as a way of identifying the place type, TOD, or mixed use characteristics. Once that work was done and allocations were done specifically in the TOD, in the CFA area, in the downtown part of Milwaukee, things were allocated elsewhere throughout the city. Blah blah blah. There was some modeling work done, and one of the aspects that really took quite a bit of time, and again, as I said, still working through, is really developing this non-home based VMT methodology as capturing one of those 4 types of VMT that we need to do for a trip that starts in Milwaukee that travels outside. I mean, really, I guess suppose travels anywhere, but certainly within the model area, and then takes a trip for lunch during a work. That non-home based trip is not specifically tied in the trip-based models back to that origin zone. So we needed a way of doing that this way, and there's some spreadsheets that sort of showed a couple different components here, but I think we've come up with a pretty good way. I will say there are some nuances here that mostly were focused on the home-based work trips that are originating from Milwaukee, not the home-based work trip that ends in Milwaukee. We could sort of work back from there and work mostly on the attraction side, not on the production side. This also works for non-home based work trip. Suffice to say, we looked at it at a couple different methods. We are providing some documentation as to why we selected one method. Both methods actually produce the same answer in a test. So we're documenting why we're doing what we're doing and why it's shown up, but we're also providing some information as to how methods can be refined in the future, and why we looked at certain things and rejected other approaches, whether that's for computational methods or otherwise. All right, next steps. Again, apologize for sort of blasting through all this. I know it's quite a bit of information. And of course, there's a tremendous amount of detail under all of these. But in terms of everybody getting a chance to look at the case study documentation, we are finalizing the Milwaukee case study. That should be done in the next week or so. Thankfully, all the work that Metro is doing for the project has been completed, and now all the materials in the consultant's hands for sort of final review. The Ashland case study is currently under review for the PMT. We hope to wrap that up later this week. And those will be available to send out to our OMSC working group, our TAC, and even the Analysis Procedure Manual user group for meetings in mid-May. These are our final group of meetings. Once we do that and publish the guidance, that will be available on our CFAC website. And then for the overall project, as I mentioned early, we are working on that toolbox for performance measures and standards. That's primarily to meet Rule 2215. We have those final meetings. The APM users group and internal staff now are reviewing that. Over the next couple of months towards summer and the end of the contract, this material will get published in different parts of the APM and the modeling analysis guide. And then finally, we're also working with another one of the CFAC projects, the multimodal data collection, on some level of traffic stress work to produce some shape files that can be shared as part of the long range planning work within TSPs. And as I mentioned early on, our modeling and analysis guidelines do not end with the completion of this project. This is something that, like all modeling, really gets modified and put to its paces through actual practice in our field as we move through the TSPs. And we hope to continue to have this as a topic for the OMSC or maybe other groups in the state to really continue to modify and improve and add things, especially as we move towards activity-based models for all of our MPOs, or incorporate things like urban sim for land use modeling and et cetera. Okay. Any questions? And happy to join a discussion and take stuff offline too if we are running short.
Yes, thank you, Zachary. I appreciate you presenting that efficiently. I would say maybe one or two questions. So maybe right now one at the moment, just to kind of keep on track with the time. So any one question for Zachary?
I see one from Joseph.
Yes, this is Joseph Fall from the city of Hillsborough. I was just curious about the city of Ashland example with the, I saw like around about like almost 2% reduction in VMT per capita, but I'm just kind of curious on how the correlation with the greenhouse reduction targets that are in Oregon Administrative Rule 660-44, like how, I mean, how is TPAL looking at that to see if Ashland can actually achieve, like, are they able to achieve those greenhouse gas reduction targets with all the work that they're doing to try to reduce their VMT? Are they able to achieve those actual targets that are in that division?
Well, a couple of things with that. It's a great question, and ultimately that is sort of the key elements. So the greenhouse gas reduction targets are done with the Vision Eval model, and those incorporate a number of different elements, including some incredibly important statewide policies. Reducing VMT is part of that, though there's no target specifically for VMT, at least as far as the transportation system plan. It just can't create any new one. For Southern Oregon, there's not I don't believe there's any scenario planning required. Division 12 includes a number of elements from in section 905 and 910 that incorporate some elements to help transportation and housing components, performance measures really to help bridge that gap between the results in the vision eval, which set those statewide targets for greenhouse gas pollution, to some aspects of transportation policy in as much as TSP. That being said, the reduction in VMT, I don't know if that 2% is enough in of itself to totally meet all the targets, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. And there are a number of other different policies where the city can the city can incorporate that are in some ways not related to transportation, and a lot of them are housing that can hopefully move us towards the target, even if that's still maybe seen as aspirational to a certain extent.
Actually, I've been thinking the question that Zach, you raised about the Ashland, like
Yes.
why when it's not the household increase, decrease, they don't equal exactly. Because we did a model, because the CFA has more multifamily development, because the density control, total population is the same within Ashland. The non-HCFA, CFA has not exactly changed. The multifamily has more households than the so it's not exactly the same number of change. Yeah, maybe I should go to the slides. People probably lost track of where to talk about.
And Jen, apologize, I probably do have to move forward a little bit. And so again, if there's any questions, feel free to follow up with Zachary. And also, as Jen was mentioning, he's the modeler for that model. So he was also involved in that particular modeling effort too. So I'm sure if you had any questions or anything like that, feel free to follow up with those folks. And also one caveat too with, the case studies was, again, as Zachary was mentioning, going through the process, going through the guidance that was being developed. So, ultimately the targets that have to be met, that's not just on TPAL, that's of course from the locality too. So I just a quick reminder again, what the case studies were kind of primarily for. So yeah, sorry to cut you off, Jen, and thank you, Zachary. And yes, so we'll move to our next presentation. I apologize, Tara, probably don't have a great setup for you, but I know the folks that in this room and likely in the virtual room are maybe involved in the new FHWA GHG performance measure and on ODOT's, and that is being primarily led by Tara here and also by Natalie. And you had a presentation by Shen, but that group, that data analytics performance reporting group out of TPAL, is also providing technical support as needed. So I'll just turn it over to you, Tara.
Great, sounds good. Wish I could be there with you guys today. Been at many of these and missed all those lunches and stuff. So, and Eugene, how fun would that be? Especially taking the train. That was the other idea I had. But anyway, I'm here today remotely as usual in the last couple years, and a lot of you, as Chris is saying, are definitely kind of been involved in our process here. So this will be familiar to many of you. You're probably also familiar with the hiccup that's been happening with whether this rule is, mandatory, voluntary. It's been moving around in the courts and so forth. So we'll address that at the end, but a little spoiler that there is, some movement on that front that we're still actually trying to figure out because it's still moving. Natalie's here because she's doing the actual reporting on this. I'm here to kind of jump in with Climate Office to, sort of help set the stage in our first time out doing this and what sources of data and all that and coordinate that. But the idea with Natalie was to do that. So she will talk about some of the calculations that she actually performed as we go through this. All right, next slide, Natalie, thanks. Okay, so let me pin this. For some reason, I'm not seeing my slide as easily. So let me see if I can pin the right. There we go. Okay. All right. So yes, back in December, we got word that this greenhouse gas measure was going to come online. And this is one more measure in the group of measures that the federal government was FHWA was requiring on sort of strings to our funding from them. So a series of transportation performance measures, congestion measures, and so forth, GHG was being added to that. Came out in the CFR register in January, and we had this quick turnaround that we were supposed to, at the state level, apply this in February. And then 6 months later at the MPOs would also do the same effort. So what is the effort? The idea was that, yes, we want to track greenhouse gas metrics. So the metric there is tailpipe. So we talked about tailpipe, and EVs are free, and then you might grab those if you go to life cycle, but this is tailpipe CO2 emissions on the national highway system. So that's the sort of narrow authority they were using on that sense. So that's the metric. They really wanted us to set some targets. So then they had to have this percent change, the measure being the percent change compared to a baseline, which they chose as year 2022. And then that target, the only kind of requirement they put on it was that it would be declining. And then like all the other TPMs in this set, there'd be these for these performance periods, 2 years and 4 years. And so for this first round, it was this 4 year. And then again, just making sure that applicability, they needed us to shrink down to the national highway system. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The other key thing there was that there were no specific penalties if you did not achieve these targets. So they just wanted us to start tracking these. And then if you didn't achieve it, you just have to sort of explain, you know, why and what you might do next period to make up for that. And the idea was that we would do this for a set, and then we'd come back in October of 2026, and we would have calendar year 2025 that we could say, did we achieve that target? Then go through the process again of setting new targets and so forth, just like all the other performance measures. Next slide. And so this applied to both the DOT and the metropolitan areas. And as I mentioned, DOT had to go first here. And so this has already been submitted. It's really kind of middle school math here for the DOT version. We have 3 things circled there that you use in your calculation. Fuel consumed is gallons we're already reporting as the DOT to FHWA. Multiply by emissions factors that are just tailpipe for the fuel mix nationally that was given to us by the FHWA. So that would give you your total statewide emissions. And then you're just taking the share on the NHS and using the VMT that we already report for HPMS, the Highway Performance Management work. So simple math, you could see there calendar 2022, there's our statewide GHG 17.5, and then the NHS. We actually voluntarily reported for calendar year 2021 as well. Anyway, so that's the reporting on what you observed really based on the gallons of fuels that are sold, both gasoline and diesel. Next slide. So the real trick here with the DOT, since that is not very challenging to calculate, is to set a target. And a lot of states were just setting their legislative greenhouse gas reduction goals, which we do have, but we know that we've gone a little bit further and have some other things. We have revenue forecasts that are out there that have to predict, at least on the light duty side, as to what how many gallons would be sold, because that would gas tax is based on gallons at this point, so that would affect the revenues. Highway cost allocation can get to those sort of heavier vehicles and an estimate of their diesel sales. So with that, we could get one source, but really we wanted to go to our Oregon Transportation Emissions website that is reporting on emissions. And we wanted to say, hey, we're supposed to, and that's that chart over to the right, is we're supposed to get to that vision, the statewide strategy in gold. We're not quite there. 5 years ago, we were on that dash line. Now we're on the solid line. So what we're trying to report here is something that's consistent with where that plans and trends 2022 solid blue line is. Jumping to the left-hand side, this would be reporting. We reported in that 2021 year in blue, and then now we had reported on calendar year 2022 in white. And so we're figuring out with the stuff on the right and these forecasts where we want to fall in there. And so, as I said, we chose this plans and trends 2022 change in gas sales out of that model to set that target. That target is in that teal blue there, minus 5.8% over that time period from calendar year 22 to 25, which would lead us to that 16.5 million metric tons statewide. So that was done and reported in February. And so then we were moving on to share that with our MPO partners, and we've had a couple meetings and say, okay, 6 months from now, you guys will need to report. So that's, I think, the next slide. And there were some options here. Because we know gas sales is a little bit more fluid, you can buy gas in one, metropolitan area and drive to another pretty easily. Driving out of the state is a little harder, so it's a better measure at the state level, not as good at the metropolitan level. So they gave some options, and really the first one is really easy. We've already calculated the state's GHG. If we take the MPO's share of vehicle miles within the state, we can apply that share to the state's GHG reporting. Secondly, another option would be to estimate it based on vehicle miles traveled. So we know HPMS reports, so we're trying to get to some more observed levels. So HPMS reports VMT that has occurred on the roadway, and we can apply the MOVE's emission factors. So those are starting to get back to what James talked about this morning, emission factors. And we had to make some assumptions on speed there. So those are really the two options. We're not really exercising 3 and 4. When we get to the target side, so that was just reporting what's that metric, then you're saying, where will we be in a few years? The easy option they give you is just go with the state's target, as long as you agree to plan and program your projects and show how they're contributing toward accomplishment of that state goal. Secondly, develop your own quantifiable target for your metropolitan area. And so we did work through some of these calculations recently, and Natalie will report on those. So that ends up becoming this 4x4 matrix. Each MPO, are you going with option A, B, C, or D, as we line up, the 2 metric options and the 2 target options. A being the easiest, and then, getting more difficult as we move along. And Natalie will tell you more about these different options, basically.
Okay, so I'm going to go over the metric 1 and metric 2. So that's in the chart on the table on the left. They are pretty similar. The difference is in that last column, and the greatest difference was for Portland and Corvallis and Walla Walla. The smaller MPOs, that difference is probably based on how small the emissions are. And for Portland, it's probably related to the additional inputs that we used with breaking down by vehicle type and emission rates.
And
So
Natalie, before we leave the slide, sorry.
Oh, I wasn't leaving the slide. So metric 1, you take the state's CO2 emissions on the NHS and just multiply it by the VMT for each MPO over the VMT for the statewide NHS. For metric 2, we break down the VMT by light duty, medium, and heavy, and that was done using HPMS data. For the emission rates, we actually kept it simple, and I had existing emissions for Multnomah County with the EPA MOVES model that James talked about. And I was using the version 3. There's now a version 4 out. And for the NHS, we used 45 miles per hour. TPOW did run all the MPOs on the NHS, and 45 was a reasonable number. Tara, did you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, because Peter had a comment this morning about how the emission rates, so this is where they are looking similar, but this is only calendar year 2022, so a historic average. And we're basically saying metric 1 that was derived based on gallons looks pretty similar to metric 2 that was derived based on VMT and MOVES. And the MOVES here, as I think you'll note in the next slide, does account for the percent EV in calendar year 2022.
In a couple of slides, yeah.
Okay.
So that was looking at the metric 1 and 2 from that block chart. And Tara just presented on this slide, but this is target 1 option, which is for the MPOs to take on the state's target, which was a 5.8% reduction from years 2022 to 2025. So for option number 2 for targets would be, we calculated in examples, MPO, and we used Corvallis. TPOW calculated or interpolated from the base year 2019 and future year 2040 of the RTP model. The VMT for year 2022 and 2025, and broke out the VMT by speed bins. So there's 16 speed bins in moves. They're basically 5 miles per hour apart. And the speed bins are shown on the graph on the right. And the emission rates are for light duty, blue, medium duty, orange, and heavy duty is gray. So they start really high at low speeds, and they go down, and then they slightly come back up for higher speeds.
If I could chime in a little bit there.
Oh, right.
So I think at the bottom there, where we're getting this output from the travel model of VMT by speed bins by vehicle type, that's that link back to what James was talking about this morning. The other thing I wanted to point out here is the sort of challenge we realized when we started to look into this is that, you know, you do have to interpolate, right? Your RTP typically has a base year like 2019 and goes out to one future year. So you just only have those 2 points to interpolate. And in reality, you might have a project that comes online in 2023, but we're not being able to make that distinction in here because of that interpolation. So it was really helpful for us to work through these issues, you know, really how we would do them to sort of understand the sort of strengths and weaknesses of the options and what what they really reflect. And I guess the other thing I would mention is the chart on the right. I think right now those are calendar year 2022 CO2 emissions, but I think there'd be like a dash set of lines that would be lower that would represent the 2025 if we had put those in. So I think there is a difference in those emission rates because the EV share in particular is one of the key drivers of that. And we are reflecting that in the calculations that Natalie's doing.
Okay, so this slide goes through the inputs and moves, which should just be a refresher because James went through it earlier today. So for the Corvallis run, I use the moves model, which has more correct data based on the changes to the regulations. And moves is updated every 3 years as DEQ submits to EPA, our emissions inventory. The things in moves that can change and improve the emission rates are the vehicle age distribution, the different types of vehicles. There's 13 vehicle types and different fuel types, and then the population. So that's the annual vehicle registration population, how many are light duty versus all the 13 categories. And then the vehicle mix varies by road type. And there's 4 road types. You got highway and arterial in an urban setting, and then highway and arterial in a rural setting. And speed distribution is those 16 speed bins. You're looking at how much time in each speed in an hour is spent in each of those speed bins. And then we've got the associated VMT forecasts, which are also put into moves. So out of moves for this example are emission rates. And so if you jump down to the green writing, what we did was to calculate the total emissions is we took the percent of EV VMT and just call that 0. And then we took the rest of the VMT broken down by the 3 vehicle categories and multiplied them by all of those 16 speed bins. And here's the outcome. The table on the left is looking at the change in VMT between 2022 and 2025. And then the table on the right is the emissions. So this exercise showed that the VMT is going up by 3% both in the entire MPO, and if you're looking just at the NHS, it's 2.9, close enough to 3. And then the emissions are dropping by 7%. And this is by just doing what is in the plan and using our interpolated VMTs, this is what will happen. So the assumptions are light duty are all gas, which we know isn't correct, medium and heavy or diesel. So we use the diesel emission factors. This use moves. We had the HPMS to break down the vehicle type. And the speed came from TPOW's COM model. We ran moves in Douglas County, which, if you remember from James's map, for now the moves 4 is assigning counties that they aren't necessarily located in, but have similar features. So it's representative. And then for the EVs, based on the vision model, for 2022, we had 1% EV for light vehicles, and in 2025, we assume that becomes 3%, and 1% for medium and heavy trucks in 2025. And that's not looking at sales, that's looking at the stock. That's all for me. I'll turn it back to Tara.
Great, and a shout out to Nick Meltzer for volunteering Corvallis to let us work through those examples. And I think that's a really good example of what those rates that we're talking about that James could do. So we're doing this in the context of this role, but it is something that now we can do sort of, model requests and do that sort of thing on travel models and, TSPs, RTPs, that kind of thing. So right now it's probably still a sort of spoon feeding a little bit by Natalie and potentially, TPOW if that's the model you're using. But I think we can get to that. All right, so I don't mean this to be animated, so let's move through this. The last thing is on the targets, if you need to, if you're adopting the state target or even if you're doing your own, you need to somehow show that you're, working towards that target. So that, this slide is indicating, hey, we're kind of doing similar things, tracking to that on the CFEC work. And so in particular, what's in yellow there is that CFEC is setting a local 2050 path for all of the 8 metropolitan areas to reach the greenhouse gas targets that are rolled up into the STS. So we're all nested in this thing and set performance measures to track to that path. So by saying you're on that path through some of the CFEC work, we can also be, saying that we're on the path to the federal greenhouse gas targets. So next slide. So this is where we're kind of comparing those things side by side because they're not exactly the same. The state rules on the left are applied to jurisdictions within the metropolitan areas. On the right, it's the MPOs proper. On the left, it's this performance measure to a path. On the right, we have these particular measures and a target that you're setting that you need to show progress towards. The target itself on the left numerically is in this household-based VMT per capita that Zachary mentioned, a little bit different than on-road. And then on the right, it's more on-road tailpipe. So it's not life cycle, it's just tailpipe, and it's on the NHS, that subset of, but it is all vehicles, where on the left it's light duty. So they're not the same metric by far, and then the reporting cycle, we are doing some foundational work to sort of set up some of the targets that will be tracked right now, and those will go through being updated in the TSPs and reported narratively annually, but then with each RTP cycle, these jurisdictions need to do a major report. And so we're like, in that combination of that major report, could that be pulled into the RTP, which, on the federal rules would need to report in the RTP, their progress towards, you know, that federal target. So that was the idea, is that, and I think we're trying to do this anyway, making this easy, because it is, the STS has set these targets for the metropolitan areas, which are at a region level. So it makes sense that it would be reported in the RTP by the metropolitan area at a regional level, as opposed to the individual jurisdictions, which is what we have on the left. So we're trying to make this the easy path, and satisfy those two together. So next slide. So we were getting down to the point of like, okay, we need, you know, metropolitan areas need to go talk to all their electeds through these policy boards and so forth, and kind of dialed in on, you know, which choice they were making, A, B, C, or D. If they chose kind of column A, the target, there'd be more that, or less work for the metropolitan region, that ODOT does more of that calculation. Pretty much we've already calculated A and B, so no big deal. If they're sorry, A was done, and B, right. C would involve more. That was the Corvallis example. And if you chose, if a metropolitan area chose to do anything in column 2 with their own quantified target, there would be more onus on them to calculate and report that. So we were getting to this point, and then next slide. On March 27th, a court case came out and said that, you know, put a pause on this whole thing. Vacated and remanded that greenhouse gas performance measure. There was a second court case as well. And so we were in this, you know, when we initially heard about this and go, gosh, you know, this is just one more chapter in this greenhouse gas target. It originally came out in the Obama administration, you know, was pulled back by the Trump administration, came out, you know, last December. And so we just sort of thought this was another bump in the road and we'd get through it. As we're hearing, there might be some conversations even at the US House and Senate level. So anyway, we're working on this, but our initial reaction was to, you know, as we state there in black, to show support for the measure. You know, you don't really manage what you don't measure. So, and I think it's a really good complement to the forward-looking rules that we have. A lot of our targets are, will we get there? And it's not so much what is our progress? What changes have we made to date, and has it moved the needle? So there's less of that backward looking, and we've been somewhat criticized for that. So I think having more of that. We do have the statewide multi-sector greenhouse gas. So we know transportation in general on an annual basis through some DEQ work, but that has aviation, you know, pulled in with ports, pulled in with these on-road. So nonetheless, I'm just saying, I think it's a very good complement to what we've done. And so I'd like to see it in there, but I know we're sort of in this space now that we're trying to figure out what's the best way to go, both for the state, which we've already submitted and won't pull that back, but in terms of the metropolitan areas. And I think there are options for us to just do this at a statewide level, since we've already calculated some of those metrics as well, that we could just start sharing those on an annual basis. So still trying to figure out what that looks like. And so I'll just stop there with you know, what our status is at this point. And welcome questions.
Yes, thank you all. And yes, definitely would like still have time for questions. So yeah, I'll pause here to see if there's anyone that did have questions or comments.
Yeah,
Peter had one. Yeah.
yeah, thank you, Tara and Natalie. This is the second time I've seen this presentation, and I actually learn more every time I see it. Could we go back to the slide that shows the results of the method B for column, where you use the moves and the post-process with the EV percentage? Forward one more slide, or I'm sorry, the other direction. So it shows like the 2022 versus 2025. So this is something that definitely like piques my interest. So here we see an increase in VMT, but a reduction from 2022 to 2025, but a reduction in GHG or emissions. Because I assume the EV assumption, the fleet mix went up from 1% EV to 3% EV. So I assume that's correct.
It's part of it.
Okay, well, I guess that's my question is there any way to break out what's driving that percent decrease in GHG emissions? Because if it truly is the fleet assumption, if it is the increase from 1% to 3% EVs, and that's actually driving a decrease in greenhouse gases, even though VMT is increasing. What are the policy implications of something like that, particularly as it applies to like a local jurisdiction for CFAC or CFA, where the whole goal is greenhouse gas reduction, but we see here that it's not necessarily tied to VMT. It's tied more to fuel consumption.
So I think what's not observed here is that the Corvallis area has a reduction in VMT per capita, but it does not have a reduction in VMT absolute. So they are slowing the growth of VMT, which is helping the greenhouse gas. Even our STS doesn't say we're going to have absolute reductions in VMT in the future. We are going to have reductions in VMT per capita to slow the VMT growth. And then you're going to couple that with cleaning up the miles that do remain. So it's that combination, and you're not, I mean, the VMT per capita improvement is not shown in this slide, right? Because I don't know that we know the population. I guess we could go back to the model and pull that out. That might be a good third chart on here to break out what you're saying. The other dimension that's not shown, and I don't even know if this changed because we haven't looked at it, is it's very sensitive to speeds, and it's very sensitive to like trucks versus light duty VMT. So if we were able to reduce the light duty VMT and not the trucks are dirtier, right? So there's this dynamic of which ones are reducing per capita. So there's that dimension. And then the speeds, if there was cleanup in, you know, some bottlenecks that maybe improve the speeds to more ideal levels. So those are the factors that go into it. You know, you can kind of name them. Reduce the VMT, particularly reduce the heavy duty trucks that are 3 times the emission rates of regular passengers.
The EV was just a couple of the percent points. The vehicle turnover had an impact too.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah,
even
and I
just
guess
getting newer vehicles in the fleet, the feds show that newer vehicles right through federal CAFE standards are improving that too. So there's a number of dynamics here, Peter, that you're not seeing all of those.
Absolutely. I get that. I guess what I'm hoping for is that we could somehow break out what the impact is of each one of those to see where we're getting the most bang for the buck. Like, how much is VMT per capita decrease contributing to the decrease in GHG? How much is the fleet turnover? How much is the switch to EV? I just think that would be very informative for our policymakers if they could see exactly what is driving that GHG reduction.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's a big change.
Yeah.
Tara,
What
did
is a
this
big change?
did this
Sorry, I missed
usually
that.
adopt?
Well, we were saying just particularly because that's a big change in just 3 years.
The 7%.
Yeah.
Did this use the adopted RTP scenario?
I'm pretty sure, Alex.
Yeah, I whispered, I think so to Nick. I think so.
Yeah. So and just from the MPO's perspective, so we just adopted an RTP that we did scenario planning for the future year, and the scenario that the policy board shows was a pretty big reduction or a pretty big increase in transit and bike usage. So I think our bike mode splits in the future year were like close to double digits, and the transit mode I think doubled as well. So we're into the teens, I think maybe for both of those. And so we showed a VMT per capita reduction over the next 20 years to start with.
That's supposed to be 35, isn't it? Or is it only 25?
It's 25 because that's the target. It's just a 3 year.
Yeah.
It's 2022.
Yeah.
We don't have a model. It's 2025. That was that linear interpolation,
Okay. Oh.
which is a 3 year hop.
And so that's what I'm curious too, is how much are we seeing from 22 to 43
Yeah.
versus 22 to 25?
Yeah. So maybe it's the latter years where we're seeing a more increase into the front years that are seeing interpolations.
But I mean, if you got a 7% reduction in 3 years, that's way on trend. Like that's really good.
Great.
I think from remembering the RTP, I think the population was expected to age in Corvallis too. So
Yeah.
fewer workers.
And it would just be useful to know like what's driving that. Is it the EV? Is it the CAFE standards? Is it the reduced? I know it's all of those things,
Yeah.
but like what percentage? How much is each one of those driving that?
and I think we're gonna get cut off here, but I did just want to add, so because we have that RTP with the adopted scenario to reduce VMT, we talked about, it's no longer required, but it's optional for MPOs. And so we're gonna bring that conversation to our TAC next week to see what they want to do, because I expect the feds will come back with something else in the future, and it's already in our adopted RTP. So there's kind of a reason to just move forward with maybe a target that's not as strict, or but it'll be really interesting to see where our conversation goes. I don't know where it'll end.
Great. We're just here to support the MPOs and what they need to do that. If we want to still submit, we can do that through some kind of the notes section until this all gets sorted out at the federal level as to what they want. And I think we're toying with ideas of maybe just keeping that, because we would only even report that every 4 years, right? Like we could do it more annually. This isn't a complex calculation that we've done. When you take out the targets in particular, it's not a very complex conversation, so we could post it on the website. So just debating these things and certainly listening to, what the conversations that are happening around the tables that Nick's mentioning.
Thank you again. Yeah, I am kind of off, sorry. Very good discussion. Yeah, thank you, Tara, Natalie, and also I know PK was also available for questions there. So thank you also, PK. And yes, we'll move or almost through the agenda. And so the next part is really just talking about the OMUG events and some other nationwide events. And I'll have Lei-Ming go over those items.
Hey, thank you, Chris. So I'm reporting the OMUG, or update you on OMUG events on behalf of the OMUG Coordinating Committee, which is made up of Kyle, myself, and Garth. Since the last OMSC meeting in October, we had 3 events. In October, we have the GHG analysis updates, guest moderated by Tara. And I think we probably see some of the further progress in today's meeting done by kind of overlap group here as well. And then in December, we had a session on probe data. Loosely, and then focusing on how probe data and newer data sources like RTs as being kind of available and can be used in various applications. And then in January this year, we have our regular post-TRB social and brown bag. And we have a pretty well attended kind of event, and then have attendees of TRB conference to kind of share their takeaways and chat. So, and looking ahead, we have 3 events, four events scheduled in the for this year. So next week, next Thursday specifically, at I believe start at 10. We have the transportation safety, a transportation safety session, taking advice from the OMSC Executive Committee. We moved this event a year ahead of time. Also take advantage that we have some other sessions that needs a bit more time to curate. So that we will have Metro staff come in to talk about modeling work for Vision Zero, safety analysis in the multi-criteria modeling framework. And finally, Josh Rowe and Nathan McNeil will talk about some of their work on pedestrian safety and social equity in Oregon. And then in summer, we will, as I commented in my comments after Shen's presentation, that will have him come back to have a rerun of his presentation, hopefully have a bit more time, and then allow a bit more technical detail of analysis. So for those of you that are interested in the topic, and you certainly pretty much, you are all welcome to join us and then probably have a little more time for discussion on the topic. And then beyond that that session, that topic, we also have two additional topics focused on pedestrian accurator data and data fusion. And in the fall, currently we are planning to have a vision eval overview and application topic. So this is something I have been working on, and of course, given that vision and grid step, the predecessor, pretty much originate in ODOT. So we certainly have a lot of kind of thing to, a lot of people to tap on, a lot of topic to present. So we need to think about what to focusing on. And then in late fall, we'll have another session on performance measures, standards, and mobility policy. So those four are what's currently planned. And move on to kind of a bigger kind of community. Those are the upcoming conferences that may be of interest to OMSC. And in May, the MPO, Association of MPOs, will have their planning tools and training symposium in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then in June, there are two meetings, somehow only same dates. ASC International Conference on Transportation and Development in Atlanta, and then the TRB Conference on Advancing Transportation Equity in Baltimore. And then in July, two more conference on from IT's annual meeting, and then also TRB's Automated Road Symposium in Philadelphia and San Diego, respectively. Then in August, TRB's symposium on environment, energy, and livable economy in Denver. So certainly probably not a complete list. If you have any additional information in terms of upcoming conference or any events that may be of interest to the group, I believe we can probably still have a bit more time for you to or chime in. And then in terms of links, the agenda will have the links for each of the event. And I'm not sure whether we stop here for, maybe I would just wrap this up, and then you can all share any information you have. And as always, we welcome any suggestions for future topics. Or even if you don't have a specific kind of presenter, panelist in mind, but if there is any topic that you are kind of interested in learning a bit more, we can potentially see whether we can pull our strengths to organize a session on those specific topics. One example, of course, the transportation safety. We do think it's only a topic that we probably should organize a little sooner, but we take the advice from the executive committee and move it forward. So we'll have it sooner rather than later. And email us or contact us through the OregonModels.org website. And with that, let me know if you have any questions, comments, and of course, feel free to share if you have any information about future events, conference that may be of interest to this group.
Do you want to mention Kyle's idea for the lightning talks at the moment?
Yep. Yeah, that's thanks, Carol, for bringing this up. So I believe this is something that Kyle did when he was the sole coordinator for OMAG for a while. We bring back a so-called lightning talk, maybe 5-10 minutes talk. It could be anything that's ongoing or some technical tips that may be of interest to a larger group of modelers, OMUG, as name indicate, or modeling user group. So for next week, when we have for the transportation safety session, we have Miguel Fignazzi, one of my colleagues, civil engineering at PSU. He will be give a very brief 5-minute talk on some of his current work on the safety topic. I'll probably give a very short, brief version of using or doing basically functional programming using R. So on the more on the technical or programming side. And those are the two we have for now, but for any future kind of session events, if you have anything related or not directly related to the current session, if you want to update something you have been working on, some tips you're willing to share with the modeling community, feel free to volunteer. We are actively recruiting. We can do maybe up to three per OMOG events. So yeah, volunteers welcome.
And yes, thank you. And yeah, plenty going on certainly with the OMUG as well. I finally see myself. So no, I know. I was looking for a second. Okay, but I did want to pause just as Lamine mentioned is if there's any other conference ideas that's not listed or not presented, I will just pause here to see if anyone want to bring those up just for general awareness for the group. All right, sounds good. Thank you again. And yeah, so the last item is really, I'll open up to the group here to see if anyone did have any announcements or anything that makes sense to share for the good of the order. This could be staffing updates. This could be efforts that you all are working on that might make sense for other people to be aware of. Again, open up to everyone, even also in the virtual room too. I know we're all anxious to get going, but
I don't know why.
Go ahead, just.
Why you didn't list the Polaris conference or training 3-day free? That's good for students, for anybody want to attend. It's also advanced modeling, network simulation stuff.
Yep, good point. We should probably, is it already passed or is it upcoming?
Yeah, unfortunately already passed, but the students free can get $500 sponsorship also,
Okay. Cool, yeah. Yeah, good point. Yeah, we should probably.
You only listed things that are occurring after this meeting.
Yep.
Just, yeah.
No, that's in the future, right, Jen?
It's happening in the future, yeah. It's May, I think May 17 or something.
Yeah, no.
15 to 17.
Okay,
yeah.
We had an OMUG thing with Polaris, but they have an on-site kind of training, a little bit of 2-day training. Is that right, Jen? And yeah,
3-day training. I thought it's good for PSU for student educational because they sponsor students. If you have some presentation, they give you like $500 or something. Yeah.
I guess one quick announcement too. Thanks for the addition, Jen. Maybe it's not even a good announcement to have, but yeah, there's for the TPAL staff, there has been a CPAC related position that we've been trying to hire. It was a P1 position, so it did require a PE license, and that's been pretty difficult to hire. So we actually closed down that announcement and kind of rethinking what that would be. So not really a major staffing update in that it's has been a little bit of a struggle to fill that position. That'd be again working with Zachary on that analytical CPAC work.
I mentioned to Tara something in passing, and I think that's turning into us having a meeting and putting together a presentation. So Campo did scenario planning for their RTP back in 2017, which Carol was a part of, and they had different land use scenarios. And so I casually mentioned to Tara, we should do a look back at that and see what scenario happened and whether the results were right or how right. And so I think we're meeting tomorrow to talk about that. So maybe a future presentation or future topic.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that's really appropriate now as we're thinking of all the governor housing, you know, and some of the decisions that need to be made about, you know, the cost of putting housing in different locations, and some of those might not be, you know, short-term and long-term costs. And so I think there's a good story here in Corvallis about having navigated that path a little bit that we might try to tease out.
I'll pose, again, feel free to share. I'll pose one last question here, though. Again, this is a new format for the biannual meeting. Just want to see your initial thoughts or feedback on how the new format was. If that worked well, if that didn't work well.
I think it worked well. Yeah, I thought this seemed to go by pretty smoothly and a lot less redundancy than in past meetings. So I like this one personally.
I also note that we have about the same people in the room this time as we had last time too. So I don't know that location is necessarily a factor in who's online and with us and who's present with us. So, but it was nice to have a different location this time. See the place. Kelly didn't have to drive.
Yeah. I walked on with my coffee bag.
Is there a net VMT impact?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
But yeah, Tara, you had comments?
Tara?
Yeah, so the only thought I have is, you know, I feel like most of the conversation has been with us, you know, motorheads, right? Like we get into the weeds, and so wondering if there's policy people here, how they felt about this, because I know we did do some pretty deep dives in a couple areas that I loved, but I'm just, you know, are we serving both audiences, or, you know, that's kind of the question on the table. So I don't know if there's any like more planner folks that might have a reaction to this, and so it'd be great if this is also serving them. And anyway, so that was my kind of comment or question to the group.
Thanks for bringing that up, Jared. This is Kelly. Yeah, as from the more of the policy planning side, it was really heavy for me, but interesting to hear. Maybe we balance it with a policy type of or planning type of application in the future. The CFAC staff and the GHG performance measures all relevant, so it definitely hit a lot of spots.
Right, and I know we have a lot of people online too that are, you know, at different levels. So I don't know if any of those people are willing to chime in if this is what they were hoping for, or if it hits them a little too deep, or anyway, just if there's anybody online that wanted to weigh in. Appreciate that, Kelly.
Yeah,
Guess I'm
great. Yeah,
looking-
can I be?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tara. I was gonna say I'd be interested in that too.
Yeah, and I'm looking through here. It looks like, you know, the people I'm seeing that I don't normally see necessarily, maybe more, you know, sort of, you know, engineers and folks at cities. So trying to see if there's anybody here that's not really as technical. Often we do have, you know, maybe managers from DEQ or other sister agencies. So that's what I was kind of looking for, but they've not lasted this long in the chat box. So.
Well, already, no, like, again, great insight. I'd be curious about that too. Sounds like we may not have those folks right now, but so yeah, with that, I think I'll probably close the meeting. Again, thank you all for attending. And again, it's a significant chunk of time. So again, thank again for Callie for hosting person, and yeah, hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Great. Good discussion.